This is Dan Schneider. On this Dan Schneider video interview, I have another in my Actors on Acting series. Michele Greene is the woman before you. She's probably best known for her role on LA Law back in the 80s and 90s, and we'll be talking about her career and the art and craft of acting in a moment. Michele Greene is my guest. This is my 12th Actors on Acting show. She is probably best known for her role on LA Law. I will be talking with her about acting as an art form and a craft. But as I usually like to do, I would like to have her spend a few minutes talk about where she comes from, her background in and out of arts, and so forth, so that we can then take off from there. So, Michele, welcome. And were you from an artistic family? What is your background?
I am actually. My mother was a singer for many, many years. Well, no, actually, not many years. She was a singer when she was young, and then she gave up when she got married, like women did in the 1950s. Um, but my mother was always in performing arts. We grew up in a home where you were very aware of theater and music and books and literature. My mother would, when we were children, my mother would, as a bedtime story, she would sit on the edge of the bed and tell us the story of Wuthering Heights, right? And we would talk about my mother's favorite plays, like Death of a Salesman. When we were children, we knew like certain lines from that play because my mother would talk about how universal some of those themes were. My father passed away when I was an infant, so I grew up only with my mother's family, who are all Central Americans, Mexican Central Americans. So it was a bilingual household. My mother's two sisters had been singers with her in a trio. Sort of like in the I was born in the 1960s, but in the 1950s, I guess there was a famous Latin trio out of Mexico called Trio Los Panchos, and they sang these beautiful three-part harmonies, and they had three guitars, and my mother and her sisters were in a trio like that. And we grew up hearing all these stories about doing shows at the $1 Million downtown and opening for this artist or that artist, or being on a tour with this person or that person. So it was very much part of our world. It wasn't like something foreign. So I do think that had a big part in my interest in the arts and my interest in music and my interest in performing. And then when I was ready to go to college, I got into this. I applied to an audition for the conservatory program at USC, which at that time had been set up by John Houseman and was being run by Duncan Ross from Seattle Rep. And it was a great program. I had done drama in high school, like kids do drama in high school. I was in Guys and Dolls. I was in, You Can't Take It With You. But that was like high school drama. None of us knew what we were doing. None of us were very good. And then when I went to college is when I began really understanding theater and understanding acting theory and training, but that's a lifelong process because I learned millions of things that made me a better actress after I got out of school, obviously. So,
looking at your name, it wasn't until I actually started looking into your past that I saw that you are, I guess, half Hispanic, because you have
yes.
such fair skin, at least, and your name Green, so one would think that you are either Jewish or maybe Anglo. And so, have you ever gotten Hispanic parts since you are bilingual?
Never in a million years.
Yeah.
I speak fluent Spanish. I'm the only one in my family who looks like this. My brother, if you look at my brother, you're like, who's that Mexican guy? He's got black hair and olive skin. All my relatives on my mother's side do. I look like my father's side of the family, where they all have blue eyes and they're really fair. And but I'm not actually as fair as you think, because I never burn in the sun. I have a fair amount of pigment in my skin, but no, I never get cast in those roles because if I went to work in Mexico or someplace, I might get cast because you see a whole range of actors and actresses in other countries. But in this country, if you're going to play the Latino role, they really want you to look like a stereotypical. They want you to register as, oh, this is a Latina or this is a Latino immediately.
That sort of I guess day-to-day typecasting, has that been a help or a hindrance to you? Have you wanted roles, for example, that I don't know, could star as Salma Hayek's sister or something, but they said you, you
Yeah,
know.
I would love to do roles in Spanish. I would love to do roles where you got to be a Latina character, um, but a lot of it also it's marketing for them, and they look at it like we've got to have something that's at the end of the day in the entertainment industry. You're a commodity. I mean, you really are, and it's a battle that I think most actors have because you feel, or maybe not all of us do, but some of us do. We feel like artists. We feel like we bring something particular to a certain role, or whether we do something in a way that is unique to us. But to a movie studio, to a television network, to a producer, you're a commodity, and they want like the simplest kind of tagline thing. Okay, we want to be able to describe you in like 5 words. Boom, 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 boom. And when you turn human beings and artists who tend to be very multifaceted, and you try and put that into like, okay, here's just a blurb that we're going to say that's going to sell you. That's very difficult because you have to leave out all kinds of things, right? And you go for the most obvious. And in my case, the most obvious is certainly not that I'm half Mexican and Central American.
We're recording here in 2016, and you have my 12th actor interview, and it's interesting that you call yourself an artist because I've been surprised with maybe 4 or 5 of the actors that I've interviewed previously. There seems to be a clear divide between them in that some look at the business end and say, I'm an actor, I do what the director wants, he wants me here, he wants me there, he wants to say it this way, that way, he wants me to stand and turn left, I'll do it. They approach it as a business, they're in the entertainment industry, and they're no different, I guess, in their mind's eye than a welder would be in building a skyscraper. Then there are the actors that I've interviewed that view themselves as I'm an artist, and they've talked with a certain amount of pride in that I will not let a director I'll in the end of the day I'll do what that director wants, but I will make it known that I feel that this character blah blah blah. I would take it you're on the artist rather than the sort of worker side.
Yeah, I mean, I do. I'll tell you honestly, when you're working in television or you're working in a movie, there are all these different considerations. There are some jobs you take because they're going to pay you really well.
Yeah.
There are some jobs you take because you love the script. There are some jobs you take because you haven't worked in a while and you need to do something. There are some jobs you take because you're going to go to a great location. There's a lot of different reasons why what your sort of investment is in any job. And a lot of TV jobs, like doing guest shots and stuff, you're like a cog in a wheel. They want you to supply a certain emotional element. It's like you're a symphony, right? And they want you to be the French horn, or they want you to be the saxophone. And you know that you have to supply that. A lot of episodic TV is very formulaic, so there's certain things you have to be the X, if you're the grieving mother, which I've been so many times, I've lost count, you're going to have a couple big breakdowns, when the CSI guys show you the photo of your son's body or whatnot. They're going to want those things from you. So you sort of know there's certain things you have to do. And in a lot of ways, when it's a job that I look at as sort of, it's a money job, I'm going to do my best at it, but I know that the material is limited in a certain way, I'm absolutely fine with, what do you want me to do? You want me to stand here? You want me to go there? Okay. Because at the end of the day also, you're working with a crew of all these people, and they're all working for the same thing. They all want to get that shot. They all want to move on. They want to get that little piece of the story. So I'm not an actor who will really argue a point in a situation like that, unless they just really want you to do something that makes no sense. Yeah. And then you do sort of have to stand up. But there are different kinds of projects. There are different projects where it really, really matters, especially like if you're doing a theater project. It matters. You can't do it like the wrong way, in those situations I will say, no, this doesn't make any sense. There's no through line for this character. This, human beings and characters in any piece of fiction or dramatic art, they're logical. I mean, even a serial killer is logical. So their emotional through line has to make sense. You can't just have them suddenly do some crazy thing to serve the plot that doesn't make sense, that the character would not do that. So a lot of an actor's work sometimes is trying to find justifications that make sense, given, that the script or the director requires something from you for the purpose of plot. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Is there a greater sense of urgency as an artist when you're doing stage because your audience is only 20 or 50 feet away? Whereas if you're filming a film that's going to be seen in some dark theater months from now, it's not?
Yeah. There's also a lot of stuff that's out of your hands when you're working in TV or film. And these are very, very serious elements of what the final product looks like. You have no idea how they're going to score it, right?
Yeah.
You have no idea how they're going to score it. And you may think that your performance is going to seem a certain way. And then you see the final product, and they've scored some music to it that either, it's the incredible power of music in film and in television, I think, is underestimated. It can do half your work for you as an actor. It can do half the work for the writer by setting the tone, by setting the scene. It can also do the opposite. It can pull it away from, it can mislead you a bit as to where the scene is going. So there are all these elements that are out of your hands. You don't know how they're going to edit it. You don't know what close-up they're going to use. You don't know what angle. Is that part that you think is great even going to make it to the final cut? Is it going to end up on the floor? Where with theater, you have this very immediate sense that they are there, they are seeing what you are doing, and you're just out there. You know what I mean? There's an exposure, like you're just out there, and you have to make that experience and that story come alive and resonate with those people right now.
You mentioned music, and you're one of the few people that have mentioned some of the more technical aspects. Has there ever been a time when you've done a scene, like say a grieving mother, and you hear the score, and the score maybe, because music acts on a subliminal level. This is why we have so-called people backward masking. You go to a supermarket, buy some Vaseline, underneath or something. So you could be giving the performance of your life, but if there's a sort of light little sea chanty playing subliminally, you're not going to feel as empathetic towards that character, because the music implies that character maybe is thinking of something else and is just putting on a performance rather than really feeling it. Has there ever been times when you've seen it and you said, "Oh my God"?
I'm trying to remember a particular instance. I know it's happened because I remember sitting with friends of mine and going, "Oh, why did he hear that music?" But I don't remember what project it was. At this point, I feel like, people will say to me, "Oh, I saw you in such and such," and I think, "What the heck was that?"
Yeah.
And then suddenly I go, "Oh yeah, I was tied up in a closet, and I was, But I know that's happened. I remember sitting at an actress named Hilary Danner, a wonderful actress. I was at Hilary Danner's house with a bunch of people watching some movie that we did together, and there was a moment where I went, "What is that music?" Because it does. Sometimes it ruins it. It'll let you know that suspense is coming when you shouldn't necessarily know. So a score, that, and what I mean, that the collaborative aspect of television and film. You collaborate with all these other people, but you don't know that you're collaborating with them. You're not collaborating with them in real time.
Yeah.
You're not collaborating with the editor. You are, but you're not there, and you're collaborating with the composer, but you have no idea how he's going or she is going to feel that scene and write music for it. So it's a strange thing because you're in like a weird bubble, but the final product is the collaboration between all these people.
So let me just backtrack for a moment and talk about your family again. You mentioned your mother and your father had died. Was your father in any way involved in the arts, or did you know his extended family?
No, not at all.
No?
Not at all. They were like Okie farmers in Oklahoma.
Okay.
And my uncle went to Las Vegas when it was just a little dusty I don't know, backwater, and he became one of the original owners of the Golden Nugget, with a couple of business partners, and then several of his brothers and sisters followed him out there, and that's how my parents met. My father was working as the bar manager at the Golden Nugget. My mother was doing a gig there with her sisters.
So you said your mother, sort of trained you or would speak lines from Death of a Salesman and other plays. Uh, were you and your siblings then inculcated into storytelling rather than say, reading Cricket in Times Square? Were you being instilled in like O'Neill and Ibsen and whatnot?
Well, I think that my mother. I think one of the great tragedies of my mother's life is that she didn't go to college and become a professor of some kind. Because my mother's incredibly bright woman, and she just grew up in a time and in a certain culture where that wasn't something they even considered.
Mm-hmm.
And my mother has a tremendous love of literature and love of poetry and love of fiction, literary fiction, and great plays. And so I think that what happened was my brother is a literature professor at Stanford, a very, very world-renowned academic. And I think that we just grew up in a home where we were all avid readers. We would sit sometimes on a Sunday afternoon and all the house was silent and all three of us were, squirreled away somewhere reading. That's still my greatest pleasure in my life is, my God, if I can find an hour to just sit and read a book. And I think that we were very sort of immersed in language and the power of language. And I think that's kind of why we both went into the different professions that we did. That we both are very. You just grow up in a world that's aware of that and storytelling and a lot of. I see it with my own son. My son is 9, and we make up these crazy stories about the dog or the cat, or the cat is just doing something cats do, and we come up with some crazy motivation. Well, what he's really doing is blah blah blah, and I see it in my son already. He loves to tell stories, and he loves to go to plays, and so I think it is something that we were just kind of surrounded by.
Yeah.
It was my mother's influence, absolutely.
You mentioned also, was it Jane Austen or the Bronte sisters? You mentioned someone reading that. When you were growing up, because you're one day shy of being exactly 3 years older than me, and so you would have grown up with some of the similar influences on television and film, Saturday morning cartoons. Were you someone who was more bookish, and or were you watching Josie and the Pussycats or something?
I liked cartoons. Boy, I'd get up early. I didn't want to get up during the week to go to school, but boy, Saturday morning, I was up, and I used to love. There was nobody remembers this. Maybe you'll remember this. There was an animated King Kong cartoon.
Yeah.
King Kong, the name of King, and I was hooked on that thing like nobody's business. I loved Johnny Quest. I didn't love Johnny Quest himself. I had like a big crush on that character Haji.
Oh yeah.
His sidekick in the turban, the snake charmer. I liked Josie and the Pussycats. I did. I liked Scooby Doo. What didn't you like? I liked Hobo Kelly, which we had in this part of the country during the week before school. Did you guys have anybody like Hobo Kelly?
There was Bozo the Clown. Bozo the Clown. There was Romper Room.
There was Bozo the Clown. There was Captain Kangaroo.
Yeah.
But Hobo Kelly must have been local to Southern California. She would talk in this big, heavy, theatrical Irish brogue, and she dressed like a traditional hobo, but she had a face like a clown, and she always did that thing. A lot of those kids shows did these at that time, where they'd put on like glasses and they'd say they could see kids in the audience, and they would read names of kids who sent in postcards or something. And I remember every day before school, I was just hoping that Hobo Kelly would say my name at one point, but she never did. Then there was Sheriff John too, with the little cake that went around in circles. Did you guys have Sheriff John?
No, Hobo Kelly though sounds like Romper Room, because Romper Room they would hold up a mirror and they would say, I see Johnny, I see Ezekiel, I see Susie, I see
It was
Glenda.
very similar to Romper Room, but Hobo Kelly must have been like, I don't know, like the local Channel 5 version of that. And she had this big thing that looked like a washing machine that had been turned on its side, and you'd crank it, and a bunch of toys would come out, and then she'd pull a name out of like one of those raffle baskets. And whoever she pulled that name out of, that kid would get all those toys. And boy, was that like, we all watched Hobo Kelly. Yeah, we all wanted those toys.
You mentioned narrative and reading, and I know that in the last, I guess, decade or so, you wrote a couple of children's books. Did you initially want to be a writer? Did you initially want to be a novelist or a poet or a playwright? Or were you always wanting to be a performer, have the limelight on you?
No, I think honestly, I think that looking back on it from the perspective I have now, I think that being a writer is much more appealing to me, and always would have been much more appealing to me. I was extremely shy when I was a child, and when I got into drama in junior high school or something, there was like this thing that I was good at, and it was hard for me. It still is hard for me in some ways. It's hard to get up in front of people, and
do you feel that right now, speaking to me and to a nebulous audience that might be watching this in 20 years?
No, I've done this enough now that I'm comfortable with it. But there is always a moment of just, anxiety when you're going to go on stage in front of people, get up in front of people, live in a room. But I was like good at it, and it sort of gave me a spot that I fit into, in that strange world of high school. My brother had been this like super academic, and I was a smart kid. I did well in school, but I wasn't as good a student as my brother was. And I sort of, my identity was kind of found in being in plays. And I enjoyed it. It was really fun. It was really wholesome.
Was that because you could displace Michele Greene with, Becky
Probably.
Stewart or some other character?
Yeah, probably. There's a big appeal in that, and I think a lot of young actors are very, very drawn to that because it allows you to just step out of yourself, and you're not you, and you can be a different person, and you can act in a way that maybe you might want to, but you wouldn't in your life. There's a very a lot of people have these crazy ideas that actors just get up and act like themselves, and I guess a lot of them do. But for some of us, it really is like, oh, I get to be a different person. And there's a great appeal in that, especially for teenagers, I think. A great appeal to try on different identities. And then I started working right away, and that was really what happened. I was going to USC. I did go to USC for 4 years in their BFA program. And my plan had been to go to theater school and do theater. And then I started working in television the summer before I went to college. And I sort of miraculously got the very first job I auditioned for and got into the union. And it was incredibly easy. And I wasn't making, I was making ridiculously silly money when I look back, nothing money in the real world of television. But I was just starting, and to me it was money that I didn't have, and our family had no money. And I was on scholarship to college. And
well, Michele, if I could just ask you before we get more into that, I just wanted to ask about, there's a thing called body memory, and a lot of people will say that the way to feel happy sometimes is to smile, and if you just plant a fake smile on, sooner or later your body, the muscle tension or whatnot, sends dopamine or whatever it is to the brain, and you start feeling happier. In a similar way, confidence is thought to work in a similar way psychologically. If you played, say, a confident character or a femme fatale, and Michele Greene was this little quivering, wallflower, were you able to siphon little bits of positive things from these characters?
Yes, you are. That's one of the great things. You get to be, when you take on another person's identity, you find a little bit of that in you. You know what I mean? Because every actor is going to do, even if you all do the same role, you're all going to have differences because you're bringing an element of yourself to it. And you do. You are able to pull out certain things and go, oh, I could do that. Oh, and I do think for young people, and for young people who are emotional, who's not emotional when you're a teenager? Everybody's emotional. It's a great thing. I think it's a really, really sort of therapeutic thing for young people to be in theater because it gives you like a safe place to try out different versions of who you want to be.
Well,
You
does
know,
that
and
also
that's
work?
one.
Does that also work in the negative, though? Have there been characters that were malign in some way that you found yourself maybe drawn to and you loved the role, whether maybe it was a stage role that you did 25, 50, 100 times, and that you found that in your personal life you were carrying over some of those negative aspects?
No, no.
No?
I'll be honest. I'm the kind of actress that when I'm done, I'm done. I'm very happy, especially now. You know that I'm a grown up. I'm perfectly happy going back to me. You know,
Mm.
I'm like, okay, it's done. Boom. Either we say cut and wrap, okay, or it's hooray, everybody's applauding and the curtain goes down, and then I'm like, okay, let's go get a hamburger.
So there's an on and off button because some actors,
Yeah.
most famously someone like Brando or De Niro and the whole method stuff, they're sometimes always in character. I knew a fellow who is an actor named George Dickerson who said that he worked with Jason Patrick, and he said Jason Patrick was always the character 24/7 whenever he was filming. So if he was playing a psychopath, he treated everyone like a psychopath would. So you can turn that on and off then.
Oh yeah, yeah. I just don't. I'm not a method actor at all. I
Yeah.
don't. I mean, when I went to theater school, we did a lot of, there are elements of that are fine. It's just not me. I don't do it, and honestly, I don't have a lot of patience with it.
Yeah.
I feel like, oh come on, come on.
Yeah.
Who's in character 24 hours a day? You're playing a silly role on such and such.
So
I,
there's no demiurge of for you that propels you on. It's basically escapism as the reason that acting serves for you.
yeah, and it's storytelling.
Yeah.
It's storytelling. It's the greatest form of storytelling because you're not someone's not reading it on a page and just imagining it. You're standing up and you're embodying those people, and the people in the audience are going, "Oh, why did you do that? Oh, don't do that." Well, that's part of the experience of whether you're watching a movie or a play or anything is that we reflect like human experience back to the audience, to the viewer, right? Um, the audience agrees with what we do, or they don't agree, or they say, "God, I would never have done that," or "I had no idea that would happen this way." And that's the whole role of dramatic art, of acting, is that's how it began. As it began as a Greek chorus where you
Yeah.
reflected human experience back, and you got up and walked around and said words so that people in the audience could see their own experiences in front of them. And that's why the really universal plays, those plays are always pertinent. Shakespeare is always relevant, no matter what time you live in, what age you live in. So I think that form of storytelling to me is fabulous. I love it.
Now you've mentioned the term storytelling a number of times in just maybe the almost 25 minutes that we've been speaking. Do you find yourself challenged ever by narrative? You said like films, you can't tell necessarily the way it's going to be edited, but do you prefer, say, more experimental plays like someone like a Beckett or a Pinter, or do you prefer, the Ibsens and the O'Neills that are more straightforward in a sense? Do you find yourself because as we're talking, when I first contacted you, I think you said you were directing a play, right? Do you find, as a director, or when you deal with dramaturgs, do you sometimes like to take something familiar like Shakespeare or Aeschylus or something and say, well, let's make that a modern play, or let's do it as if blah blah, putting in like Orson Welles, did Voodoo Hamlet, I think it was.
Right.
Yeah.
I think I'm very open about all of that. I feel like the universal stories, whether you're any of the great playwrights, whether they're the post-war playwrights or the Restoration playwrights or Shakespeare or Marlowe or anybody, those stories have universal themes. That's the human experience, and that's being a human being. It doesn't matter whether you lived 500 years ago or you live now. There are certain things that are certain stages that every person is going to go through. And so those plays to me are completely universal. You could change them, you could set them anywhere, you could set them at any time. It's like if you work on Shakespeare with children, they think sometimes, or teenagers, they're all they see is the elevated language, and they think, oh, this has nothing to do with me. And then you break down what Romeo and Juliet is about, and they can completely relate to it. Your parents don't want you to date this boy. they're totally opposed to it. You can't see him, blah blah blah. There's so, and then you see kids sort of get it, and they're like, oh, it does have to do with me. Um, so I'm very very open. I've seen so many great versions of strange Shakespeare, Shakespeare done in strange ways that are not traditional. And then I really like traditional productions too. Sometimes you just want all the dresses and the whole thing.
But there's a danger there too. I mentioned this to two or three of the other actors too. That about 20 years ago, I saw King Lear, and for some reason, the director made the fool on the heath with Lear naked. And this was Minneapolis in the end of fall
Oh,
or winter, and the guy had shrinkage, and no one, and everyone was sort of giggling every time the guy with shrinkage came on stage. And 20 years later, I haven't a clue whether the play was successful.
yeah.
I'm focused on that unnecessary act of nudity, and I'm not against nudity in general on
No,
principle.
well, that's the thing. You have to do something within reason. You have to not do something that's
Yeah,
just designed to shock people or
yeah,
just designed to make them go. You better have some reason in your interpretation of it why a certain character is doing a certain thing. So if the fool is going to wear no clothes, you better darn well have a good reason why he's going to wear no clothes, especially if it's going to be so distracting. You know what I mean? To me,
yeah.
that looks like that would be like shock value. And I don't. Shock value has no place. It needs to make sense. It needs to make sense. So the story needs to make sense. At the end of the day, the story has to make sense.
But now you've been working for 30 plus years or so, around 30 years in the business. Have you noticed in whether it's stage, film, or television that there's less and less a narrative sense to be made in things? Things are thrown up for shock value. Just yesterday, I was talking with some people, some experts on the evolution of American sitcoms, and we were talking about how sort of the golden age of the 70s. Then we have Jerry Seinfeld and all the stand-up comics that got sitcoms in the 90s. And sitcoms, instead of being derived comedy from the situation, it was just a bunch of jokes being thrown at people.
Yeah.
And in the same way, you get everything's shock. Everything's close up, and Joey is missing. Is he dead? Commercial.
Yeah.
Uh, do you find that there's a cheapness, a shock value that certainly existed then, but is more dominant now?
I think what I've noticed because I watch stuff on Netflix,
Mm.
that stuff that I really liked in the '80s or something, whether it's a movie or a TV show, and then I'll watch it and I'll realize I don't realize how stylistically how many things have changed,
Yeah.
and sometimes the story will seem like it moves so slowly,
Yeah.
and then you realize at that time that was how stories were told.
Yeah.
Now stories are told like right out of the gate. There has to be like boom, boom, boom. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're right. There has to be a certain amount of shock value, a certain amount of adrenaline rush right out of the gate. And stories are not told very often nowadays in a sort of gentler, slower way because we expect it has to do also with the immediacy of the information age.
Yeah.
We want everything right now. We want to get to the meat of it right now. We want to read our news online where it's done 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 as opposed to turning 3 different pages of the New York Times. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but
We
just
want
to just
things now.
just to give an analogy though, that one of the reasons I do these interviews is I want people to see, well, number one, that acting is an art. Yeah, other than pop music, I think it's the most it's the most obvious art that people deal with on a pretty much daily basis, although they don't recognize it as art. But also that artists, that whether you're a character actor in the background or someone like you who is on a hit show, uh, is not just, oh, a pretty face, a tight ass and whatnot, that there's a brain there. And so, this takes 90 minutes or 120 minutes or something, and you talk about things, but it's like all the characters in these narratives now, these so-called dramas, which I think are really just melodramas now, not even real dramas, is that you don't get into the character. You don't have those little bridging moments where John Boy is talking with Mama Walton about, oh, hey, kitty, with Mama Walton about, just life and
Life.
existence, the way people do in real life. I mean, if you and I went out on a date, and it's a movie, we'd be in bed in two minutes later. Whereas in real life, we might court for 3 or 4 months and whatnot. And you want to see a little bit of that. At least I do. I want to see a little bit of that so that I know Well, why is he attracted to her? Why is she, with him after she coming out of an abusive relationship? That you can get a sense of the whys of something, and not just, oh, here's mannequin A, here's mannequin B. Let's see them produce a little mannequin in 9 months.
Yeah. Well, a lot of it is, there's a glut of. Now I think my cat's tail is in here.
Yeah, no,
He's
that's
trying
fine.
to get outside. He's not going outside. There's the glut of like procedurals, on television. I'll just talk about television for now. You have all of these procedurals, and they're very slick and they're beautifully shot, and they're like some of them look like little movies. But it's always the same thing. You have these main, regular characters who have to do, okay, Oscar, move.
Oh, I've got a cat named Oscar too.
It's Oscar. They do all the exposition, They have to look great in like suits that would they're way beyond the budget of any detective anywhere in the world. And they're in like these gorgeous, gorgeous like Valentino suits, and they stand around and say things like, so the perp must have wanted to, do this, this, and this. But if he wanted to do that, blah, 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 blah. And they do all of this exposition, right? And they just sort of stand around and do exposition. And the reality is nobody talks like that, If you walk into a police department, you're not going to see a bunch of detectives standing around going, but then he must have done this.
Yeah.
But if he did that, blah, blah, blah. And so they're just sort of advancing the plot, you know what I mean? There aren't that many things where you see people where they're really great characters, and then and their action comes out of who they are. And then you see some shows that are really wonderful that they do that, Although I don't watch that much current TV, so.
Yeah, I've always said character is plot. You don't.
It is?
No one gives a damn about some white whale roaming the South Pacific unless you have a psychotic captain who's pushing his men onward to get this beast because he's got something wrong mentally with something that happened with him 5 years below with this brute beast. And that's, I've always said, you have to get behind a character's eyes. If a character is walking down a street, well, an average person might notice, Guido at the salad bar, and then, there's Susie across the street buying a new hat. But a character who's a little off, maybe he notices a cockroach scurrying along the bottom, and he's obsessed with that. And why is he keeping looking at that cockroach? Forget about whether the character has blue or brown eyes. What is that character seeing? What is important to that character? And from there, you can unfurl a plot. And you can do that, I think, more easily in stage. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think in theater, you're working in a linear plot. I mean, you're going from everything goes beginning, middle, end, and it follows a trajectory. It's not broken up. You don't shoot the end of. I've done many projects where you shoot like the big final scene is the second day of work, and you hardly know the crew and you hardly know the other actors. And then you wish later on, after you've been working for a month and a half or whatever, you go, God, I wish we'd shot that once we had a certain groove and a familiarity with each other. But in theater, no, you have a beginning and a middle and an end, and you rehearse and you go through all these explorations and you lead up to a performance. So it's a much more organic way of working for an actor, and more fun. It's just more fun.
Well, let me go back to high school or whatnot. Was there ever a film, a performance, an actor, or even an actress or actor, male or female, that you said, "Wow, I want to do what he or she does"? It was, give me 2 or 3 icons or performances that.
I remember exactly what it was. One of them was Jill Clayburgh. She was in a TV movie when I was probably about 10 years old. And I don't know why my mother let me watch this movie, because it was about like hookers. It was called God, I can't remember the name of it. It was called Hustling. It wasn't called that. It was called, I don't remember the name of it. But Jill Clayburgh starred in it. It was set in New York, and she was a hooker. She was like a streetwalker. And I even forget who else was in it. Lee Remick might have been in it. And she sort of like followed her life and her attempts to sort of clean up her life. And I was absolutely blown away by this. I was blown away by this TV movie. I was blown away by Jill Clayburgh's performance. it was like this world that I knew nothing about. I was a kid in Southern California, and suddenly I was seeing this woman make this character come completely alive. And I was really, really. I remember that was the moment I was like, "Wow,
Was it Portnoy's
that's
Complaint or
amazing."
the telephone book?
Pardon me?
Portnoy's Complaint or the telephone book? She was
No,
in
no, it was
The Wedding Party, The Choice.
no, it was a TV movie, and it was on like in 1972 or
The
73.
Snoop Sisters, The Thief Who Came to Dinner.
No,
Going
no, it had like one name. It had like one word.
One word, The Wedding Party, The Choice. Let's see. Maud. No, Hustling.
Hustling.
Okay, that's 75. She played a character called
75.
Wanda.
I was older.
Okay.
Yeah, I was older. I was 13 then.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so I guess I wasn't that bad. I wasn't 10 years old watching it. I was 13.
Okay.
But I remember that movie completely blew me away. Her performance is so great in that movie. She was such a great actress, Jill Clayburgh.
Yeah.
And I mean, I just remember being stunned, just not, like, because I suddenly felt like I had entered this world that was so different than the world I knew, and I just loved it, and that had a huge impact on me. Huge impact on me.
And was the main reason because you said I can do that and get outside of Michele Greene, or did you want to be Jill Clayburgh touching Michele Greene 20 years from then? Did you want to pay it forward, as you will?
I just wanted to be able to do what those actresses could do. I wanted to be able to get up there and open up a different world for a viewer. I wanted to take some person who was a character on a page and make them into a living, breathing person that somebody's sitting, that Jill Clayburgh is a grown woman shooting this movie in New York, and I'm a 13-year-old girl in Southern California watching it in my living room going, wow, I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And
did you know that you could do it? Did you know that you had the right stuff, as they say?
I didn't.
No?
At that point, no, I didn't. I think I was just getting into drama, and my mother wanted me to go into drama because I was really, really shy. And my brother had been in high school. He had been sort of in drama club or class or whatnot as an extracurricular sort of activity, and I would go see him in plays, and it looked like so much fun, So, but I was extremely shy. I was really, really shy. I remember my mother took me when I was 12 on a bus. I don't know what was wrong. Our car must have been in the shop, or we had no car at that. I don't know. We went on a bus up La Brea to this park in LA called Plummer Park. It's in West Hollywood. Now it's West Hollywood. Back then it was just Hollywood. And they had like a community theater program where, they were doing Alice in Wonderland. My mom and I went, and I was way too scared to go in. I was terrified to go in. And I stood outside and I said to my mom, I can't do it. I can't go in. I can't go in. And she said, okay, but I just want you to know, if you don't go in now, you probably are never going to go in to any audition or be in any play ever. And the notion that it all hinged on whether I went in to audition for Alice in Wonderland or not, it worked because I went in and I auditioned and I got the role of the Queen of Hearts. And I remember I was ecstatic on the way home. I was ecstatic, But at that time, I didn't know. I mean, I wasn't one of those kids who like to perform. There's some kids, even when they're little, they get up and they sing and they do all. I was never that kid. And I think I said my lines in Alice in Wonderland. I think I said them like, blah, 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 because I was probably so scared. But it was about a year later, it was around about 13, that I started to sort of go, hey, maybe I can do this. Maybe I can pretend to be other people. And looking back on it now, I realize that I instinctively, as a very young person, this is what I mean about not being like a method actor. I really like to work from the outside in. I like to make a physical adjustment or do something that frees up my imagination. I'm going to make a slight adjustment to the cock of my head or the way I hold hold my shoulder or something, and that will free up like a different person in me, as opposed to, and that is a much more effective way of acting for me than it is for me to be like, oh, how do I feel? Because I really do believe that in acting, it really is that thing of like smile and then you'll start to feel happy. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? For me, and that's not so much. That's not a method way of acting. You know, to me, it's like okay, make an adjustment. Oh, pretty soon this funny change in your voice will come out, and then pretty soon you have a whole person.
So,
Oh, and then it's really like a game of pretend, and it's a lot more fun.
so given that one of the primary reasons for acting is to get outside of yourself, if you have or have had the choice between, say, two roles, both equally good in different ways. One is you're playing, say, a fantasy character in something like maybe this Game of Thrones or Lord of the Rings kind of thing, where you have magical powers and you're the Empress of Doomhofer or whatever. Or you can play, a woman with two kids whose husbands are cheating loud, who left her, and whose mother abused her as an alcoholic. And say a John Cassavetes kind of a drama. Do you prefer that more realistic, or do you prefer the more escapist, or does it really matter?
When I was younger, I would have preferred the more realistic, the more sort of gritty. Now that I'm older, I'd much rather be the person with the superpowers,
Yeah,
wearing crazy robes.
yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Now, this play that you directed, are you acting in it? This recent one as
Uh,
well?
I'm finishing up this crazy gig I got. I moved up to the mountains outside of Los Angeles a few years ago, um, mostly because my neighborhood had gotten like so traffic logged that I couldn't get to the supermarket, which was like 3 blocks away in under an hour. You know, and once I became a parent, I was suddenly out at peak traffic times. And
Hmm.
the traffic in LA has become really dreadful. I love Los Angeles. I'm one of those people who I love Los Angeles like it were a person. I just love my city. But it was really, really hard for me as a single parent to kind of like get around um, and that's why I sort of thought, okay, I'd always kind of wanted to move out of the city, but I need to move close enough that I can get back easily for auditions and work, but far enough that I feel like I'm someplace else. So I moved up to this cute little town in the mountains called Lake Arrowhead. And then I fell into this strange gig that I'm finishing up in a few weeks as the artistic director of an emerging venue that wanted to be a theater performing arts venue, theater, music, everything. It sort of evolved into a kind of local hard rock band venue, which is fine, but that's not exactly what I'm interested in doing. Um, so I've done a number of plays with them, and I brought plays up from LA. I brought up professional actors and whatnot. Uh, and so I've done one or two shows that I just finished doing a show that I was in. I directed a play called Talking With by Jane Martin. Um, it's a play I've always wanted to do. It came out in 1983 when I was in college. And it was just so innovative and so different. And it's all 11 monologues, these really interesting characters. They have nothing to do with each other. They never interact. Some are really sad, some are really funny, some are really eccentric. And I've done it up here. We just closed it last weekend. And I did one of the monologues, which is the monologue I always wanted to do since I was very young. I did the like evangelical snake handler, um, and it was great fun. I mean, it's great fun, and I really love directing. I love directing. I love like shaping a performance and saying no, no. I love the discovery process where you're up on your feet and you go, no, no, it'd be really funny right there if you do blah blah blah, and I enjoy that a lot, a lot.
Since you're now sort of in the obverse position of the actor, have you now come to look at acting in a different way? What have you learned that you may not have known just as an actor alone?
Well, I think part of it is that when you're an actor, you kind of think that you can play everything, right? You sort of have this idea like, I could do a great version of that. And I think that part of it is just an actor's ego. But the reality is, in many, many instances, there is going to be another person, another actor, who is going to have some quality, either in their physical type or in the sound of their voice or some physical quality or something about them that is going to be more that character than you at your greatest will ever be. And when you're directing, you see that more, and you realize, like, well, that person did a good performance, but this other person just sort of is that character more. And there is a need for that kind of economy, when you're directing. You need to get the person in there who's going to do the job and do it the most dependably and get to where you need them to be right away or as quickly as possible, because you want to go, this person might be great if we had 6 months of rehearsal, but we don't. So I can see there's a lot of other reasons why you choose things when you're on the other side.
Yeah.
As opposed to actors who just think, but I'd be great in that,
Well,
somebody else is going to be better sooner.
What limits as an actor do you think that you have? Are there roles that you say, boy, I don't think, I'm just too naturally sweet to be Lady Macbeth,
Well, I'm not quite so sweet, but I'm very drawn. I always have been. I mean, what's funny is that I have sort of in my general life, I have sort of a sunny personality, but I'm very, very drawn to those very, very dark roles. I'm very drawn to the characters that have a lot of conflict and a lot of sort of anger. And I don't know if that's because that feels like maybe that's just me, and I feel like that's a safe way to access that.
Mm-hmm.
But I have a bad temper. When I get angry, I get angry. But
Do you think that women are specifically sort of delimited in those types of roles? Because when we talk about psychopaths or whatnot, usually it's the male roles, males playing mostly the serial killers. Because as in real life,
right, yeah.
most of the you've got Hitler and Stalin, and maybe you have Elizabeth Bathory from history as a psychotic ruler of a name. But other than that, most of the Sopranos are all male. Gangsters, terrorists usually are male. The Timothy McVeighs, Osama bin Laden. When we think of women in that way, it's usually the mother who, say, drowns her kids in a car in a lake or something, and it's not so. Do you think that because of that, the full range of female expression, from evil to Mary Sunshine, is not as open in roles as male?
Yeah, I think it is. I think part of it is based in reality. There are more, if you're talking about people who are violent and scary, there are more violent, scary men than there seem to be violent, scary women.
Yeah.
However, I do think that one of the main things that women come up against certainly in television and film is this whole likability thing. You got to be likable.
Well, you got to be pretty. Even at 60, you have to stay in shape. Who's the British actress who the great British actress who was she's 70 now and she was still on the most beautiful list. Helen Mirren. Helen Mirren.
Helen Mirren.
Yeah.
They're getting like bikini shots and Helen Mirren at the beach in England. And so then, you have to be pretty. You have to always look your best. You have to always look the best you can look for however old you are. But I think that there's a discomfort, in women being aggressive or women being, and there are things that's why I think so many actresses love playing Lady Macbeth, because Lady Macbeth allows you to be just evil and manipulative and
right. And I said to some black actors too that every black actor seems to have Othello on his cast list, and in a similar way, when a woman has a quote unquote deep role, it always seems to be Lady Macbeth on her resume.
Yeah.
And while that you can say, well, I played Lady Macbeth, there is something very kind of, I think, depressing, because there should be, a few dozen Lady Macbeth like roles peppered in around, but that seems to be just, you want to play someone with a little bitchiness and depth, you've got Lady Macbeth. Why are you complaining?
You can play Hit a Gobbler, but then you're tragic. You can play Goneril or Regan from King Lear. But really, most of the time, it's just not written for women, and especially in TV and film. That's why I love that movie that Charlize Theron did about Eileen. How do you say her last name?
Wuornos.
Yeah, she was so wonderful in that film.
But here's the thing: she's this gorgeous model, and a couple of months ago, she talked about how it's so difficult for beautiful women to get roles, and there was a couple of actors. The girl from Welcome to the Dollhouse, who was a child and now she's grown up, he was like, "Oh, boo hoo hoo, Charlize, you're complaining about getting roles. You know, try being, an average looking woman in this business." And
Yeah.
again, you got Charlize. You had to ugly her up to play that role.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, the thing is, I think Charlize Theron is quite a good actress.
Yeah.
I think um, she's so beautiful that I think there is sort of a moment of like, oh, she's so pretty. There maybe, oh, that's why she's working. I think she's quite a good actress. I've seen her in a number of things that I thought she was quite good in. But you do. I mean, there also is, that's part of the sale value of that film is you take this gorgeous woman and you turn her into this scary looking, serial killer, and there is this sort of like, ooh, is that her factor. But yeah, there are also plenty of actresses that you could have put in that role, and you wouldn't have had to do that big transformation on them as well. There is, I mean, if you're a character actress, that's a certain road, and you can. The good thing about being a character actress is you can keep working and working and working and working.
Yeah.
And when you are sort of a leading lady, you have a shelf time.
Yeah.
Especially if you play like a sort of spunky girl next door, that ends at a certain point because it becomes kind of ridiculous.
Yeah. Do you think when you get a script, do you ever in your mind, for example, if you see on, so and so titled by so and so, and if the writer or writers are female or mostly female, do you ever say to yourself, do you get your hopes up, oh, maybe this will have a really better role because a woman writes it?
Yes. Yeah. Of course.
And are you disappointed if they're just following the formula more so than, a male writer?
But, there's a lot of really good female writers. Female writers do tend to write better roles for women because they understand innately the complexity of women. And, a lot of times we used to say, even on LA Law, which was a very good show, we used to say that all the female characters on LA Law, if you put them all together, they made one woman. Yeah. They were all facets of what one woman would be. But one had to be, the mousy, nervous one. That was me. Yeah. One had to be the Jill Eikenberry character, who's like the crusader. Yeah. One had to be the Grace Van Owen character, who was kind of sexy and aloof. Yeah. And one had to be the Roxanne character. You know what I mean? Yeah. But any one woman would have all those facets to her personality. Mm-hmm. But you get sort of broken down into who do I represent in the sort of division of female labor here. You're like, who do I represent? And when you have shows like that are written by a group of guys who are very, very, sort of chauvinistic macho guys, then they really write the women a very certain way, which was always a battle and a sort of an issue for all of the female actresses. All the actresses on that show.
Well, in that show or any other shows that you've done, even this latest stage work, when you get the script, certainly you want to analyze it, as you said, for logical plot holes if there are. You want to see, is my particular character, what role does that serve? But have you found that it's easier in, say, film or theater or television to go to a director and say, in this scene where my character does A, B, or C, maybe I should hold back a little bit more. Maybe I should do this. Do you ever have that impulse or desire to if you see maybe the character is just a bit trite or a bit flawed, and have you found it have most been amenable to that, or most, let's say in television where you're doing 22 episodes or whatever it is, 24 a year, is it just sort of like a factory production line?
I would say it's about 50-50. There are some. Right away. I mean, you walk on a set, right away if you're working with a director who is a really good director and really, really wants, even if it's one episode of a TV show, they really want it to be as good as it can be. And right away when you're working with a guy or a woman who's just phoning it in. Get done, boom, 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 it's on to the next thing. You know that within 5 minutes. And so when you're working with the let's get it done and move on person, I'm not always going to go to that guy and say, hey, I think right here we ought to do blah, 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 or consider this, because you're probably going to get a battle. I mean, if it's something that really really has to be said, then I'll say it. But a lot of times I go, this is not. There's not a on any set. Certainly, you know right away whether there is a real commitment to really quality work from the actors or whether there's not. Now, one great thing on LA Law was there was very high commitment to making sure that that those scenes played the way they were supposed to, that people delivered the best performance possible. We would come in and rehearse on Saturdays and Sundays. We would come in and rehearse on days we weren't working because we wanted as much time to explore those scenes. And then I worked on a show a few years ago where it was a procedural, and the two lead characters were, I'm not kidding, we were ready to shoot like a close-up, and they were on their phones texting right up until they banged the mark, and then they would say, okay, we're ready, we're going, and they'd be like, oh, sorry, and they'd put it down, and they'd say their lines, blah, blah, blah. And in one scene, when they were doing my close-up, the guy started texting in the middle of the scene because the camera wasn't on him.
Mm-hmm.
It was on me. And so while I'm like saying my lines to him, and I'm supposed to be this woman whose husband's been killed or something, and he's behind the camera and sending a message to someone on a phone. And on shows like that, there's no point in saying anything. Yeah. Because if they're letting the actors do that and there's no producer saying, stop that, forget it. Just do it, get your paycheck, and go home.
Well, let me just ask this about if that's endemic to Americans' view of female. And I say this because about a decade or so, I started getting into foreign films, whether it's the classics like Bergman or Kurosawa, Fellini, or whether it's more modern filmmakers like Steve McQueen, not the white actor, the black British director, and there's a Turkish director named Nuri Bilge Ceylan who writes wonderful women roles. And these women are deep, but in a different way than American women are. So let me just explain. You can have a woman in this Turkish director's Ub, and he's done about 7 or 8 films, and all but a couple of them are just outstanding films. And they talk about things of depth. They talk about life. They talk about death. They talk about what is my purpose. In America, when a woman is supposedly, a character is supposed to have depth, for example, last weekend I spoke with Stephanie Kramer, who is on Hunter. She said when they wanted to give sort of her deep roles on her role as a cop, they raped her one year, and then the next year they wanted to rape her character again. And she said, no, they can beat me up, but let's not rape me again. And it seems that women in America, or American women in the media, film, television, and whatnot, their depth all surrounds them, their sexuality, rather than Michele Greene. What is my purpose? Am I a good human being? If I accidentally ran over a raccoon, should I feel bad about it coming back from the theater? These things that all of us feel. But instead, like Stephanie Kramer, there's Michelle's character. I think your character I was reading, had the first lesbian kiss. And I'm not trying to put down, homosexuality, but there are things beyond being raped or sexual coming awakening that's endemic to human, not just woman. Is there, what kind of frustration is there?
That's always what it is. That's always what it is. For female characters, it's like in American films and TV, the height of drama is sexual violence.
Yeah.
That's it.
Women are vaginas with accoutrements in American, whereas in other films they're beings.
I watch a lot of British television, and I'm always amazed by, they have these like I love that show Happy Valley. I love that show. Mm-hmm. And the female character, the lead character, is so flawed, and she has her life is so difficult, and she looks like a real woman. She looks like a middle-aged woman who's a cop. It's not like here where everybody has to look like a model.
Yeah.
While I'm chasing a bad guy. And what you do see in foreign films a lot. I think in other cultures. I think you're right. I think it is a specific American thing that women are sort of put in this very particular, really limited box of what they will let you be and explore. And as a conduit to tell a bigger story, well, we have 2 or 3 portals, and that's it. That's all we can use.
Do you think that the decline of, say, what would be called family drama, say the Waltons from 40 years ago, or 8 is Enough, or Family, the Christy McNichol show from the 70s, where you had people who, yes, they were, with the exception of, most of them were in contemporaneous times middle class or better, but they were at least dealing with things like maybe dad lost his job or mortgage payment, things that people could relate to rather than just the latest serial killer that's
Yeah,
terrorizing on a 5 episode arc.
yeah. That's part of that thing we were talking about needing to have this like big bang.
Yeah.
Ah, you can't you can't tell a story, it seems, anymore in a way where you explore these human um, trials and difficulties.
Yeah.
You really, it's even a show like Roseanne, for God's sake. That show dealt with things. They dealt with issues, money issues, or you look at a show like All in the Family,
Yeah.
where the
They had talks about politics and sex
they
and
talked about
race.
politics. They talked about you could never do a show like that now. Too
Yeah.
controversial. Too this. Too that. And they don't. It's like now it has to be. Everything has to be some weird heightened violence or bang bang bang, race cars or explosions or space things. And we've moved very far away. I think it would be very hard to get a show like Family
Yeah.
or any show like that on the air.
Yeah.
Because everything, you want to start off, you want to have your teaser in the beginning, you want to have a dead body,
Yeah.
you want to have something really horrible happen right in the beginning.
Yeah, back about 20 years ago, there was a great Canadian series called Degrassi Junior High and Degrassi High, where the children were actually intelligent. They weren't just the snarky, quipping kids that are on American television. Let me just ask this. I've asked several actors this, and a lot of them will say that they prefer playing, the bad guys in roles because bad guys are always sexy, they get the best lines or whatnot. But I've always thought that, in real life, it's much more difficult to be a good person. Speaking of this existential kind of thing, it's easy to give in to your worst and become, say, some racist nut like McVeigh, or some extremist nut like Bin Laden, or some sexual pervert like Ted Bundy or Charles Manson's nonsense. But to be a good person when you're working for a soulless corporation and you have to pay the mortgage and your mother is dying of cancer and your wife is going through a midlife crisis, these things, to maintain and be that good person, to me seems to be where real drama comes from, not the melodrama of the serial killer of the week.
I agree.
Do you think that, say, with Netflix and Hulu and maybe what's going to come in the next 5 or 10 years online, that's where we're going to get the next, say, Earl Hamner, who did the Waltons, that comes along and says, enough with this shit because the network suits are never going to do it. Is that something that maybe you look forward to?
I do think so. I think this, with all of these outlets now and all of these ways to get product out there and reach an audience, that old model just that's not the working model anymore. And it's but the guys at networks are, they have a certain paradigm. That's how they're working. They want it has to be this, it has to be this, it has to have these elements. Here's this person who's been in 5 shows that have all failed, but let's give that person the lead role.
Yeah.
Because at least they were on something.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I had a friend who was a big network executive at NBC who said to me once, he said, Michelle, at the network, they would rather give a new show to someone who, like a writer, who had been on 10 failed projects than give a new writer with a great idea.
Why?
Because they just would rather have what they know.
So even if they know it's safe mediocrity?
Yeah. Even if it's less than mediocrity, even if it's never even been a mediocre success. It's just, he said they would rather give, we were talking about writing TV shows and, and scripts and developing, ideas for shows. And he said they would rather give a 15th shot to someone who had failed 14 times in a row than give it to a new person. And that's just the mentality, It's like, well, it's like the devil I know is easier than something new and completely innovative and different.
Yeah.
Because the reality is, most of those people at the network, they don't really know. They don't know good from bad. A lot of them, they just don't know, and so it's like a weird crapshoot every time. You're just hoping you're going to get the formula that works, because most of them don't. They've come up through the ranks and they don't really have a background that they would understand well, no, that's a great story.
Yeah.
You know, that's really different. You know, that no, they're sort of like just try to guess what the next hit will be, and it's a strange mentality because it's literally like you're just rolling some dice and throwing them on the ground.
Well, it's like with Hollywood that, something comes out of the blue and is a blockbuster, like Pirates of the Caribbean or something. So we're going to make Pirates of the Caribbean until it's Pirates of the Caribbean 13. Depp gets prostate cancer,
Yeah,
and it's like you would think, and I have nothing against blockbusters. If they were looked as make the quality, and let's say you get that now I guess $500 million blockbuster, but take 50 million of that even, and spread that 50 million to 10 little projects for new directors who have an
yeah,
idea, and maybe you can do a family drama with Latinos that's never been done before, or
yeah.
maybe you can do a family drama, or maybe you can do Voodoo Shakespeare with some experimental director or something, and maybe 6 or 7 out of those 10 projects won't make money, but you'll end up with 3 or 4 that you're going to get someone that you're going to have that. Whereas when you have this boom or bust mentality,
Yeah.
you're going to just strike out. And Waterworld 20 years ago with Kevin Costner is considered one of the big bombs. And I've never
Yeah.
seen the film, so I don't know whether qualitatively it was any good. But you just get that throwing of bad money after bad. But let me just go back to acting here, and especially the stage. And I guess I have a little bit of a bias towards stage acting since it's the oldest form of acting, and because it's also the most immediate. Their acting is an interpretive art, and every night or every show you have to take the same character that does the same swivel or the same pivot on the end of the stage, says the same lines to the same faces, and yet it has to be somewhat different. The last guy I spoke to told me about meeting Jason Robards, and how he had gone back-to-back nights to see the same play, and Robards pressed him until he admitted that Robards gave a better monologue in one scene the night before than before, and the guy was reluctant to say that because this is Jason Robards. He was just a college student at the time. But do you know, for example, when you've hit it on Thursday night and on Friday you go, oh, fuck?
Yes, 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 yes. You know automatically. You know, like that
Does the
moment.
audience know, or can you cover that up
No,
rather easily?
the audience can't tell. I don't think unless they come and see it several nights in a row, then they go,
Yeah.
"Hey, that was better." But the audience doesn't know. The audience is there with a very willful suspension of disbelief. They are very, very happy. They're sitting in those seats. They've paid that money because they want to be taken somewhere. So you have always a very, very willing audience in the theater. I mean, they've come there specifically to do that. It's not like you're on their TV screen in their living room and they're cooking dinner and doing 5 other things and you gotta get them.
Yeah.
Those people have come to that theater to see you. And so the relationship with that audience, they come in a very willing way. But you always know. You go, oh, that moment works so beautifully. And the great thing about acting is it's different every single time you do it. You go, oh, and sometimes you discover something. You'll be like in the middle of a thing you've done a million times, and you go, it just hit me differently that night, or that moment suddenly made sense, or it meant something different in a way that it had not before. And that's a great feeling, because then you're in it, you're in the mix, you're doing it.
What about when you're with an actor or an actress and you're doing some key scene, and either their quality is off for that night, or maybe you have had some personal difficulties off stage with that actor and working through scenes? How does that affect the performance, or do you just have to suck it up and you say, I'm gonna do this with this bitch even though I hate her guts?
You have to suck it up. You just have to suck it up. I mean, you do, because if you're supposed to, if you can pull something out of your real relationship with someone that works, you can find those moments where you can access that way you really feel about someone. That's great. But if say you really don't like someone, I did a movie once with a guy who played my husband, and I was supposed to have this great relationship with him, and I couldn't stand him. I couldn't stand anything about him. And it was so hard. But and everything that annoyed me in the elevator on the way down to get picked up for work in the morning. We were shooting in Canada. He annoyed me on the lunch break. Everything about him. But I was supposed to have this like really loving, wonderful relationship with him. And I just remember, what do? You just have to pretend you don't feel that way.
Now, the first actor that I spoke with was a woman named Karen Austin, and she said that her strategy in that situation was to find something. Maybe the way he lifts his eyebrow, she found sexy or something, and try to convince herself. Do you play a little game like that with yourself?
I've done that. I've done that with people that I dislike less than that guy. Where you can go, okay, there's something about them. They're kind of funny in this way, or they're charming in this way. That guy that was a hard one because I couldn't find one thing I liked about that guy. But it wasn't his fault. He just was so annoying. But so yeah, I think that's a good strategy too. There's got to be something about them you like. There has to be something.
Do you ever find the weight of the past on a character? Let's say if you're doing a stage role, weighs on you. For example, if let's say you were, I mentioned Jason Robards, but let's say a famous theater actor. Let's say if you were you can sing. Let's say if you were cast directly after Betty Buckley in Cats, would you have gone, oh shit, I've got to follow her?
Yeah, I would have.
Yeah.
Something like that. Yeah. Yeah. If you're going to play a role in a show that there's some person who has done like the iconic version of it, you better find some way to make it fresh and different, and not do a bad version, a copy of what they did. But you do feel, of course, you feel a lot of pressure. Anytime it's like when you hear pop songs or anything. Like I always say to people, if Emmylou Harris has done like the definitive version of Boulder to Birmingham, why is somebody else going to record it? I'm like, why bother recording it? It's not going to be as good, and you're just going to not measure up.
The last fellow I spoke to said that he had heard that a critic, a theater critic, had gotten into the practice back in the mid-20th century of reviewing opening night and then going back about 6 to 8 weeks later to re-review and see if people had improved. Have you found that shows, especially stage shows, generally get better as they go on?
Yeah.
And is just that the rote process of doing it X amount of times?
There's like an alchemy that happens. Like you can be in rehearsal, you can rehearse it up the wing wang, you can do everything, you can know what you're doing, blah blah blah, and then you get in front of a live audience, and the first time you're in front of a live audience changes everybody's performance immeasurably from that point on. And you may have had some section you struggled with in rehearsal, you couldn't get the lines or you couldn't get something. Then you have to do it in front of a live audience, and there's something that clicks into gear, and there's something, it's like alchemy. It's like this thing in you turns over, like, and then it's a different performance. It's a different thing because it has something to do with the stress and the pressure of being in front of people. It pushes you. It just pushes you that much farther. It pushes you into this different zone, and then, and once you're there, you develop in a very different way. Then you develop every time you do it in front of people. It develops and changes in a way that is not possible in rehearsal because you need that element of a live audience. It's like this thing that you have to have that to get to the next level. So if you run a show for 6 weeks, you're going to have the joy of 6 weeks of working with a live audience there and seeing how that changes you and how that changes the other actors. And it's like a magic thing. I don't know how to describe it.
Yeah. You had mentioned that on your first professional gig, you had gotten your SAG card. I know a couple of the actors, especially the character actors, said that some of them had several years of work before they could be eligible or whatnot. And some of them said that they were actually glad because they were able to do more experimental, smaller stuff. I would assume since you've been SAG, and I guess you're also Equity as well.
Yeah.
Have you ever had moments where you said, "Boy, I wish I could just go, to Boise, Idaho, and and just do something with people who are just starting out"? Is there any
Yeah.
kind of stricture in the SAG or equity framework that you sometimes now as a director feel a little bit confining? And if so, what
Um,
is it?
well, no, in terms of SAG, I'm one of those people who's always been happy with my union. I don't know, some people don't like their union, but I like my union, and I think a lot of the things that they require, things we can and can't do, I'm perfectly fine with that.
Yeah.
Because um, I feel sort of like I don't want to go to the middle of nowhere and work on a small film with someone who's never done a movie before, and you're working 20-hour days because they don't know how to
Yeah.
run a set, and pretty soon you're thinking, oh my God, what do you have to do to get off of this project? Um, and in theater, yeah, in theater, I feel like you can do smaller plays, you can do equity waiver plays, you can do plays that have have an agreement with equity. Like this theater that I'm working at right now doesn't have an equity contract because they're outside of Los Angeles. They're out in this underserved area, and you can do a play here that is and I can work with actors who maybe some of them don't have a lot of experience, which I sort of enjoy. I enjoy seeing that moment that it like connects and makes sense for them.
Mm-hmm.
I enjoy that a lot, actually. That sort of Boise, Idaho experience, I've been sort of having it up here in Lake Arrowhead. But I'm just about done with it because I've got too many other things to do, and it's too time consuming. So
Do you find a certain kind of excitement working with younger actors or inexperienced actors? Because one of the people I did interview said that they enjoy working with bad actors because you never know when they're going to fuck up, and that puts a greater challenge on you to sort of rescue them.
I don't like that part of it. No,
No.
I don't enjoy that part at all. What I do like is seeing that moment where people who've never really, there's a lot of people who work in community theater and people who are directors and whatnot. I'm just pulling my desk drawer out so I can put my foot in it. And they don't really, they're not learning to act. There's like someone who says, I want you to come in and you stand here and you do this bit of business and let's do it 10 times. That's not learning to act. Learning to act is understanding who your character is, why you say the things you say, why you speak at all. Understanding that you want something. Every person who talks wants something. And to work with actors who haven't had a lot of experience, when they start to make sense of that and realize, oh wait, this is like real life, as opposed to this weird stagey thing, that's a great feeling. That's a great feeling. I just did this play Talking With. I had a number of actresses in that who had never really done very much. And they did a wonderful job. I mean, some of them delivered these beautiful performances. And that's a great thing when you see someone who never thought they could do that. Because I do think there's something very primal about theater. I think there's something very primal in the human psyche that wants to get up and have that experience. And it's really, and when you get up and do it, I think it's powerful, and I think it's moving, and I think it sort of changes people. So I've been working with some people who've never, ever, my son, one of my son's best friends, her parents are both child psychologists. And, they work at regional center, they work as crisis counselors, and they've never been in theater, and they've just recently in the last year gotten into it. And they're wonderful. And it's such a different experience for them. It's so different than anything they've ever done. And that to me is a great feeling, to see someone sort of get up there and come alive and really get that experience and grow from it and love it. And that I like. That I really do like.
What, if anything, in the acting repertoire do you look as verboten in a character or a scene you might play? And I ask this because one of the people I interviewed had said that he didn't want to play pedophiles, and he's also an AD, and he said that he's dealt with actors sometimes who were, say, very religious, born again Christians who didn't want to play characters who did drugs or something. If you were cast as, say, a teacher who seduced her student, would you not want to do a role like that?
No, there's nothing like that because all those things. Those are stories. Those are things that happen. They happen to people. People make those choices. People do those things, and I think that for me now, there's really nothing that I would say, oh, I can't do that, because all that whole range of human experience. These are all things that happen. We all want to understand why they happen. We all read the newspaper and go, "Oh my God," you know. And theater is a way of exploring that.
Um,
Anything, acting, whether it's theater, film, or television.
do you prefer? Well, let me put it this way. A lot of times, when you see Emmy reels or nominations for the Academy Awards, usually they are these, overly or obviously dramatic moments. Someone has just been killed, someone has been diagnosed with something, a marriage is breaking up. But I've often looked to sort of the bridging scenes where characters, maybe, we've just gotten the dramatic high of Act Two, and now we're sort of going into Act Three, and the characters are in kicking back in a bar. I've often found that those kinds of scenes are where the really great acting comes
Yeah, you
out, but
do.
but most people don't notice that.
Yeah, because we're sort of geared. It's like we were talking about earlier. We're geared for the bam, 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 big moment, big moment, big moment, and that's what people expect. That's what gets the most attention. But you know what a great movie is for that? Diner.
Oh yeah,
Diner has so many of those little moments. You know,
yeah.
you have the major beats in that film, but then you have all these crazy little moments. And Kevin Bacon is so great in those moments when he's like playing Jeopardy.
Yeah.
You know, um, I think there's like a line in that movie, and it's like the camera's like on the pass. I think they've been doing something. It's Kevin Bacon and I don't know, one of the guys. I don't think it was a moment where they're playing Jeopardy or they're watching Jeopardy on TV. But there's this moment, and you just hear. I'm pretty sure it's Kevin Bacon's voice. You just hear his voice like as the camera moves away, going, "Definitely the laugh of the week," and it's maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's a different movie, but it's those little. I agree with that. There's these little moments that you go, "Oh God, that's so great." Um, yeah, there's a lot of moments like that, and you do. Attention is usually drawn. You remember that movie? I just found it in a VHS in a thrift store recently, and I'm going to watch it tonight. And Candice Bergen, I believe, won an Academy Award for this. That movie, Starting Over, with Jill
Oh
Clayburgh.
yeah, yeah. Oh yeah,
And,
yeah. I was
and
thinking of that movie when you mentioned her before.
she has that crazy scene where she sings, and she won an Academy Award, and I think she won it for that scene.
Mm.
And it's, she's come back to Burt Reynolds after he's already involved with Jill Clayburgh, and he thinks he's happy that she's there. And she's like that horrible singer-songwriter, and she puts on a tape, and she sings this song to him that she's written for him, and it's absolutely dreadful. And she does these like really awful, like sexy moves coming across the room. It is the funniest moment in that movie. And I remember seeing that movie in a theater, and I was falling out of my chair. And she won an Academy Award for that movie, and I believe she won it because nobody expected that really gorgeous sort of patrician woman to make this unadulterated fool of herself in this character. And she just went for it 100%, It was great. It's a great moment in that movie.
What scenes are you most comfortable acting in? Given your initial or natural shyness as a child, do you sometimes look forward to, if you know a shot is going to be a close up and your character is cogitating upon something ambivalently, or are you more comfortable with other characters? Because especially like in film where you can get those real close ups, you have these personal moments or seemingly personal faux moments that in real life no one else can know, but here you have to pretend that nothing else is around. Meanwhile, you have 17 other people
Right.
hanging over you.
I think I don't really have a preference. I don't mind those scenes. I'm accustomed to them because when you work with a camera for years and years and years, you get accustomed. You get accustomed to having them pull right in, and you have a camera, right in front of you, and you have an entire crew right around you. So I don't really have I don't have a preference. I'm not more fond of one or the other really, and I just look at it however they're gonna shoot it. I just have to do, I make sure I do my part of it.
I've asked this a few times with some of the other people that I've interviewed for this series. An actor is not like an accountant or line worker at a factory in a certain sense, because you you live your life, especially if you have some measure of success, as you've had, in front of the audience. 99.5% of actors will never make a living, but that 0.5% or so that maybe does have a modicum of fame, you live your life in front of the prying eyes of others. Does that entail that you've made some certain sacrifices that you would not have had to have made in your personal life? Were you, say, a vice president of marketing for, an ad agency? You mentioned that you have a child who's 9, so you would have been, I guess, in your mid-40s. Did you postpone having children later because of your acting career?
No, I didn't. I think I am. I'm marriage phobic, so there was a part of me when I was younger. Actually, it all works out the way it's supposed to. When I was younger, I sort of had this idea. I like the idea of marriage. I like the idea of the wedding. I like the idea of the dress. I like the kind of one-dimensional idea of that. But there was always a part of me from the time I was very young that was very, very scared of linking my life to another person's and having somebody else have a big say in what I do. That I'd have to make these compromises, and I'd have to. And I think I was just scared of that. I think I was really, really scared of that. I didn't realize it when I was younger. I sort of was on the young womanhood train of thinking, yes, I want these things. But then I look at the choices that I made, and I realize I obviously didn't want those things, because we choose the things we want. We do the things we want, even if that want and that desire comes out of a screwy part of us. We do the things we want. And if I had wanted to get married, I was married very briefly. I was married for like less than a year. Right away I thought, oh my God, what have I done? And I got unmarried about as quickly as a person can get unmarried. Least fuss and bother, like boom, boom, boom. But I always wanted kids. That was the thing. I always wanted kids. I wanted to have like 6 kids. I just didn't want like the whole package that came with all those kids. So I ended up adopting my son when I was in my 40s. Yeah, because I was too old to have a baby at that point. I was like, unless I was going to get donor eggs and donor everything, and then you just kind of like, why would I go to all that trouble when there are all these beautiful children who need homes? Why would I spend all that money and spend all that time and all that stress? So I adopted my son when I was I was like 45 maybe. And I will say, starting motherhood at 45, yes, I wish I had the energy I had when I was 25, but I'm glad that I know the things I know, at 45, that I knew them at 45 when my son came home. But it wasn't really that I was chasing some career or chasing some role, or I didn't think it was ever that for me. I mean, I know for some people it is. For me, it wasn't. It was, and I never, I was on a big TV series and did a lot of TV movies and all of that, but it was right before, it was before the internet became what it is now.
Yeah.
So I've never been a person who, at the height of my career, had the kind of, had that internet like another person in the room, you know what I mean? Where every single thing you do is public knowledge immediately.
Yeah, there was no TMZ cameras that Michele Greene is boinking latest Hollywood hunk.
Nothing like that, and I'm grateful for that, because for me, like, look at my website; it's totally out of date because it's only been in the last year and a half, and I hate to say it took this long, but that I really sort of became comfortable with the idea that people have this access to your life. I'm a private person, and I don't. That's something I've really sort of stood back and watched for the last, however many 7, 8 years. I've just sort of been watching it, going, wow, that's like a beast. It's like a hydra. You cut off its head, and more of them come back. It's like, and it would be. To me, it would be so difficult to be a young person who's in the entertainment business, who's really, really high profile right now, because there's no division between who you are as a private individual and who you are for public consumption.
Yes, you have one little drink, you say something untoward about this group or that group or this. and then you're scarred for life. Michele Greene, the woman who lied about this actor here and their breakup, and that'll be
Yeah.
on your tombstone.
Yeah, I know, it's crazy. You look at like that singer Ariana Grande. I don't even.
Or the fellow in the Olympics, the swimmer who just lied about being mugged.
Brian Lochte, who lied about getting mugged. The poor girl made that comment about donuts or something, and you're like, oh my God, it's everywhere.
Oh yeah.
And there's always some person who's going to be offended by something. It's like you cannot please everybody all the time, and the internet, unfortunately, gives all this access to all these people, and it's access to your life and everything you say and do. Yeah. And that's scary to me.
Well, in the next segment, I want to talk about some of the roles that we've talked about in brief here. But let me just end this segment by asking, how do you measure success on a professional sense as an actor? Is it the quality of the roles that you've done? Are you, when you are at your most Michele Greenness, looking in the mirror and whatnot, are you a mother? Are you a woman? Or are you the artist actress?
I don't know. I think now that I have a child, of course, I'm the mom first. I look at that, and I look at that as the most important. I've made a commitment to raise a person, who has to grow up and be a productive, positive person, and has to do something good in his world. And that's the main job. That's the main job. No question about that to me. I struggle with, there's a level of solitude and just psychological solitude that you need artistically, and you especially need it to write books and to write. But you need it for any artistic endeavor, and that is something that you lose when you become a parent. You just don't have that. You just don't have that. I'm a single parent, and you just don't have it. You don't have any more room that way. And so that's very hard to find and carve out little moments when you can have it. And so I would say I'm the mom first. And I don't know. I mean, I can't sort of be me and not be an artist. So I guess I'm the mom artist. Mm-hmm. I guess. Because I can't really be me in my life without, being a writer and being an actress and being a director. I can't live every day without seeing it through that prism,
Yeah.
So I guess I'm the mom/artist, but being a mom is such a great thing. It's exhausting, especially at my age, boy, when you start late like I did. But it's but it's great. I mean, it's so fun.
All right. Well, let's end this segment. In the next segment, we'll look through some of your roles, and we'll do that in a moment. I am speaking with actress Michele Greene, and we are talking now about her career on stage, in film, and on television. You had mentioned in the first segment, the first main segment, that you had a certain kind of persona on your LA Law, and I always knew that when I watched, I wasn't a very great fan of police shows or law dramas or whatnot. I did prefer the family dramas of the 70s through 80s. But when I did watch it, I always got the sense that you, as an actress, portrayed sort of that spunky, smart girl that in a slasher film wouldn't be the first one killed, but would end up being the girl huffing and puffing when the sheriff came.
That's true.
That she's the one who's going to survive the slasher film somehow.
That's true. I would be the one that's true. That's who that Abby character was.
Yeah.
She was like the spunky girl next door, who'd be in the cabin in the woods and find a way to get away from Jason,
Yeah. Was that closer to your actual personality than you really are, though?
No, not really. I mean, that Abby character was, she was sweet, and she was, I was always a lot more edgy, than Abby was. I was more kind of, I was just always drawn to things that were sort of more complex and more, I don't know. Abby to me always seemed she was such a victim. Abby was always like on the brink of something bad was always happening to Abby, and Abby was always sort of like quivering and trying to, you know, get through it. And they just saw that character that way. You know, I mean, they saw a young woman that way, and I would say to them periodically, I was like, look, you know, she's a single parent. You know, her husband's an alcoholic. She has all these clearly has all these family issues to deal with. Do we ever see that? You know, she's like the only character on the show that had children. You know, I'm like, can we ever see like a story that really tells what that story is? To be a single working mother who works really long hours in a demanding job and has a husband who's unreliable, not only financially but just emotionally and physically, in terms of safety. And you know, in that first season or second season, I forget, there's a thing where the guy kidnaps the kid and she doesn't see him for months and months. And then once he came home, it was like, I always used to say, does Abby have the greatest childcare in the world? Does she never have a moment like all of us do where you have to make a decision that's difficult between, am I going to be there for this, or do I have to be there at this thing at work, or, you know? And because none of the people who worked on that show ever dealt with those things, they never wrote it, you know, because they were all these rich guys on the West Side who had nannies. You know, they never like had to go pick their kids up from school. They were like, huh? So I always kind of wanted to explore more things about Abby's life as a single parent in a very demanding job, and in a job where you really have to be there. If you want to make partner, you really have to be there and put in all those extra hours, and you know. But they just, you know, they didn't write a lot of that for her. They mostly plugged Abby in when they needed sympathy, when they needed someone to be like.
Well, let's talk a bit more about that character later on when we go sort of chronologically through. I want to talk a little bit about your theater work, because online it's much more difficult, unless you are someone like a Betty Buckley, to find a full list of theater credits. Do you find that your theater roles have been more challenging than your film and television roles, or you know, on stage?
I think what's been difficult for me is that I started working in television when I was quite young, and I had a lot of financial responsibilities within my family that really kind of didn't make it possible to say, okay, I'm going to pick up and move to Chicago, or I'm going to move to New York. And I always sort of had this dream and this plan that I would somehow get out from under these things, and then I would move to Chicago, and I would audition for some of those great companies there, and I would do plays. And, you know, you get deeper and deeper into your life, and pretty soon you bought a house, and you bought your mother a house, and you've got all these things that you have to keep afloat. Right.
So it's difficult. It's difficult to be like Matthew Broderick, who was a teeny bopper who became a Broadway star then.
Yeah, and so for me, and when you're working in TV a lot, LA, the theater scene in LA has always been very spotty. It's better now, a lot better now, but it was always very spotty. You either had like the big houses that would do sometimes really great stuff, hard to get in. You know, they were sort of like, oh, you're that TV actress, and that's different now. But back in those days when I was doing a lot of TV, they're like, oh, you're that TV actress. Like you're not like really a stage actress, and it was difficult to get into those things. Then you have to have agents that are willing to really push you into those things, and very few agents are, because the money's not very good. So they want to push you into the stuff that's going to make money for them. So trying to shape what you want to do can be very difficult.
Well, have you found yourself sometimes not in control of your own career arc, not only from the producers, but from your agents and managers, etc.?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. I mean, I look back, and I always had a plan, and I had a really good plan for what I wanted to do. It's very hard. For me, it was very hard to find agents that would get on board with what I wanted. You know, they wanted me. I did LA Law. I got into LA Law. I was like 23 or something when I started. I was 28 or 29 when I finished. And I looked, you know, standing in someone's room at 29, I looked like I was about 23, because I was like still I was like really skinny and, and I looked really young. And I had these agents, and I mean, across the board, big agencies, small agencies, medium agencies, they were like, okay, everybody thinks you're 40 from doing LA Law, so we're just going to send you in for these roles of women that are 39, 37, 40. And I was like, okay, but I don't look that old when I get in the room. I know, but that's how old they think you are. I was like, okay, but I'm not going to get that job. Do you understand? Because I know, but that's the easy audition to get. Because for them, it was about getting the audition and getting you in there. And I changed agents a number of times right after LA Law because I, across the board, had these agents. I was 30 years old, and they were sending me in for roles that were in their early 40s. And I was like, and it was this, and I felt like I was talking to a wall, because you'd say, okay, do you understand? Here's my driver's license. Do you understand that I'm 30 years old? And like most actresses, I play a little bit younger. And because people have perceived me as being older from being in this cast of characters where almost everybody in that cast was 15 years older, 10 to 15 years older than I was, except for Blair, it doesn't now I'm not on that show. So it doesn't really matter how maybe they perceive me that way, but don't we have to actually work with what the product is? And the product is a 30-year-old woman standing in front of you. And I was at all these agencies, big agencies, great agencies that have these great reputations. And I would get these agents who would say things like, but that's just how old they think you are. And I'd say, I understand that, but don't we have to deal with how old I really am and whether I'm actually going to get the job? But that's an easy audition to get. And you really do you realize it's a numbers game for them. And when someone says, when I'm 30 and you're trying to get me in to play a great role on a series or on a movie and the character's 32 and the casting director says, oh no, Michele Greene, she's too old. You need that agent who's going to go, no. You need to meet with her. She's not the agent who says, here, let's go down to the next person on my list.
Yeah, evolution rewards the path of least resistance.
Exactly. So I went through it was a very, very demoralizing and really painful period for me, career-wise, because I had just come off this great show, and I was young, and I was pretty, and I was a good actress, and I was like, I should be at the prime, going in for all kinds of great things, and for several years, they would only send me in for characters that were way too old for me. And it was horrible. And I would see these great opportunities just passing me by. And it was so painful. It was, looking back on it now, I don't know why I didn't just stop being an actress. It just broke my heart. It broke my heart because it broke me. I was like, and I would change. I'd go from, okay, now I'm at Metropolitan. I'm going to meet with these agents, and then I'd have the same thing happen again. Then I'd say, okay, now I'm going to go to Innovative, and I'm going to go here, and and now I'm going to be at Paradigm, and now and it was like this mentality, and I kept thinking, is it me? Am I crazy? Can I really play those roles? I mean, and I'd go into these auditions, and people would say to me, oh, it was great, but you're way too young.
Yeah, I know. I get the same thing. When I don't recall if I think I contacted you via some agents that I looked up online rather than your website. But I know when I've contacted some people, and some people who probably are not even as well known as you, and their agents will be like, well, how many views do you get? My client isn't promoting anything right now. I said, well, I'm not looking for promotion. I want to talk. Maybe I saw them in a movie or some role or something and said, I'd like to just talk to them as a human being. Maybe I'm only going to get 1,000 views in the first year, whereas some nipple slip is going to get 35 million in a week. But in 15, 20 years, hopefully people will come to that. But yeah, I know what you mean. There's the expectation that there has to be some kind of immediate payoff. Like, an agent might say, well, if Michele does this interview, is this going to look good? And will Steven Spielberg, think of casting her in his upcoming drama or something? Well, that's not the reason I'm asking. If that happens,
Yeah.
great, and she gets a good job.
Everything, when you're dealing with agents are just sort of like a necessary evil. If you can find a really good one, that's
Yeah.
great. I know some actors who have been so fortunate they found somebody early in their career who totally believed in them
Yeah.
and was in sync with what they wanted. That was not the case for me at all. It was very difficult for me always.
Was stage a
And
way to exit from that, to take a little bit of
yeah, in a
control?
certain way, stage gives you freedom to explore different characters, to play different characters, to do things you're not going to ever get cast in. Um,
And what was
and
the first role, say, after LA Law that you did on stage, and in what way was that sort of a freeing experience?
trying to think. I didn't do plays for a long time. I was just on that. I
The
was just on
movie
that
of the
TV
week? Yeah.
thing. I was on that TV cycle of TV movie. I mean, I
Was
remember a
it the
period of
thing
time.
where one movie you were having an abortion, the next movie you were,
Relieved. The next
yeah,
movie,
yeah,
someone was, trying to rape you and you shot them,
yeah,
and then in the next movie, your kid was kidnapped,
yeah,
Women in Jeopardy,
yeah.
Lifetime. I'm just trying to think. I'm trying to think. I didn't do plays for a long time. I'm trying to think what it is. When I started to get back, I do like a little play here and a little play there. I do like a little Shakespeare. I do like As You Like It here, and then I did a.
And was there a bias against you, as you said? What were you? Oh, there she must be a prima donna. She was on L.A. Law. Let's all kiss her ass.
I don't think there was that. I mean, I don't think I've ever given that off. I certainly
No.
hope not. Because when you're an actor, you're whether you're in a stage play or you're on a film crew. I mean, there's so many other people there that need to do their jobs. And you need to do yours. If you're supposed to be there at a certain time and you're supposed to know those lines, and you're supposed to have on that damn wardrobe, then you be there and you do that and you do it. Because there's some makeup artists who came in hours before you did, and there's some, grips who are going to be there way after you leave. And they're all trying to get the same thing. And they're all trying to help you get your scene played out and get it shot and get it in the can. And you have a responsibility to those people, to not be a big prima donna. I've never ever in my life been one of those people who like makes people wait on the set because I'm having a fit. I mean, that's so self-indulgent. It's like, get over it. You're probably making more money than everybody else here. Get on that set and do your work.
Yeah.
That's how I feel, because all those people cannot be held up because you're just, having a hissy fit in your dressing room. And there are some people who think that's like part of being an actor. I'm sorry, that to me is like, go to another planet. I mean, really, go live on an island, because that is not being an actor. But in stage, no, I don't think I've never been someone who I think comes in the room with that. I'm always I'm sort of I always want everybody to feel comfortable.
Is well, if it took you several years to start doing some stage, as you look back now, is there a role or two that you think was your best, and what was it about the role or the play?
Trying to think. Oh God, no! I'll be honest with you. I wish I could pull something out of my hat that I thought was really great. I did a play a few years back. I don't know, maybe 10 years ago. That I actually loved it. It was a wonderful play called Charlotte. It was about. It was almost like an operetta. It was so beautiful. It was about a German Jewish painter named Charlotte Solomon.
Yeah.
It was directed by Louis Fantasia, who's a wonderful, wonderful director in LA at the Met Theater. And it was a play about this young woman came from a very well-educated, well-to-do family. Her father was a doctor. I think her whole family had been physicians. And in Nazi Germany, they as this web started closing on Europe and in Germany, she was a very prolific painter, a young painter, and she there had been like 7 people in her family who had committed suicide. And her grandmother and her aunt and this and her mother and all. And as I gather, as I started researching that play, suicide is something that I think is like a theme that I think a lot of people who've had parents who've committed suicide have felt that at maybe some point they're going to, or that, and that's in the psychology of suicide. I read a lot of stuff about people who felt that when they had a family history of suicide, that there was perhaps something inevitable about it for them, and there's a weight of that. And so Charlotte Solomon was living through this horrible time of the Nazis closing in on the Jews all over Europe, and she began this like wild, prolific painting, like painting on anything she could find, right? She would paint, and she'd paint all these scenes from her life, and she would paint her family history, and she sort of painted compulsively. And she wrote like librettos for music in this very autobiographical way. And her family sent her to Holland to escape from the Nazis. And she lived in this little like attic apartment in Holland and painted absolutely obsessively. And she painted out all of her struggle with this concept of suicide. And I played her mother, who killed herself, jumped out of a window and killed herself. And it was not a huge role, but it was a really powerful role. And it had this. What happened was Charlotte Solomon was killed by the Nazis. She was told she had to go and register somewhere because she got married, and of course it was a trap. And they put them on a cattle car and took them to Auschwitz, and she was killed immediately. Her family survived, and after the war, they went to this little attic apartment where she had been living, and the landlady gave them her suitcase, and they thought it would have her personal effects, and all it had were paintings on every possible piece of wood, piece of cardboard, back of an envelope, just paintings and paintings and paintings that told her whole story. And so these playwrights and composers sort of got a hold of that, and wrote this beautiful play, which actually has a lot of music and has a lot of singing, but the singing is almost like an operetta. It is really difficult singing. It was a beautiful play, and I think that maybe in the last 10 years or so, that's probably the play that I loved the most, because it encompassed everything about the artistic experience. It had these great characters, and what they did was they dropped down these big panels, and they would project Charlotte Solomon's paintings onto them. So the stage had like 3 of these huge panels, and you could spin them around, and it just encompassed everything. It encompassed music and language and theater and acting and art, and that was great. That was one of those moments you feel like, "Ooh, I'm in it. I'm in the mix." You know?
Yeah, theater does seem to be more daring than most Hollywood stuff. One of the people I spoke to, I forget who now, just 2 or 3 interviews ago, said he was in a play wherein the female character was supposed to be raped, and what they did was they had like the gang rapist come in towards her. The lights went down, and then you saw like some purple light hanging above the stage as you heard, just muffled violence and whatnot, rather than just showing it. And it was the character escaping, and the purplish light, I guess, was either her soul or her looking towards the end of a light at the end of the tunnel kind of thing, but in a poetic way. Do you think that American stage right now, at least as you've experienced, is more daring than film and television?
I think stage is always more daring, always. I mean, you just have this freedom. You can do these different things. You're always going to have to do your crowd pleaser shows, right? You're going to have to do your, I always say, you're going to, for every time you do Fiddler on the Roof, you can then maybe do, a couple of small plays that are interesting. Not that show's not interesting, but, we all know our sort of blockbuster shows that we're familiar with,
Oh, what a beautiful morning.
Oh, what a beautiful thing. Yeah. I mean, there's the shows we all know. We know them. We've seen them. We want to go see them again. But you can always do these small. That's been one of my struggles at this venue that I've been working at, is trying to do these small plays and do these plays that you don't see staged very often. So that in this small underserved community, you can go to this place and not have to drive down the mountain and go to another city, and you can go and see a great play. Like we did a short play series last year, and we coupled up 2 plays. One was a play that most people are familiar with, which was a very classic radio drama of Sorry Wrong Number. And then the second play was a play that is not very well known, by Melanie Marnich, called The Right to Remain. And the key element in both of those plays was telephone. Of course, one was a telephone in the 1930s, and one was a telephone now. There was a smartphone that had all kinds of information on it. And the second play was about a cheating husband who comes home and discovers that his wife and his teenage daughter know that he's having an affair because the daughter's hacked into his phone.
Mm.
And it's a short, small play, but it's got this little slice of life in it. And, so I'm up here in this weird town in the mountains, and I'm going, let's do these two plays because this link between them, this telephone technology, and it's like, they all look at me like I have three hands. And I'm like, okay, no, really, let's try to do that. And I think you can do very interesting stuff, in theater, and especially in small theater, and it's great. I mean, when I leave this place, I have this one show that finishes and opens and closes in October, and then I'm done, and then I'm going to set up a different little theater company up here where I'm not aligned with a certain particular venue, and I have to sort of work with people who have no background in the arts. So so for that I will, because that's interesting to me. It's interesting to me to say, look, we're going to do this play that nobody's ever heard of, but it's a great play.
Well, let's take a little walk on the lowest common denominator side a bit and look at your IMDb.
I have plenty of lowest common denominators.
Okay. You had mentioned getting your SAG card, and it looks like your first credit here is something called Dorothy, a 1979 series. Was that where you got your card? Was that
Yes, Dorothy was.
There's no listing of what it was, though, here on IMDb.
Well, it was a sitcom for CBS, and if you can imagine, it was a bad version of Facts of Life.
Okay.
Okay? It made Facts of Life look like, Man for All Seasons.
Yeah.
It was starring Dorothy Loudon, who was coming off of a big Broadway run of Sweeney Todd.
Okay.
And she was this very loud, brassy, New York, broad, nice woman, older woman. And she was supposed to be the headmistress in a girls' school with 4 stock characters, where one was the pretty one was the smart one was the, dingy one, and one was the whatever. I think I played the sort of dingy one. And it had all of those, like, boom, bad jokes. And, it was just what it was, right? I didn't know. I auditioned for it. It was my first audition. I'd only had an agent like 2 weeks, and I'd gotten an agent because a friend of my brother's had become an actor, and he was working a bit and doing some TV stuff, and he introduced me to his agent, and I was 17.
Mm-hmm.
And I went and met this agent, nice little woman in the Valley. Actually, the best agent I ever had, to be honest.
Mm.
And I went and met her, and she was very nice, very, whiskey-voiced old lady. Very maternal, and she sent me on this call, and I got the job.
Mm.
I was like, oh. I had no idea I had signed a 5-year contract because I had no idea what it was.
Yeah.
And I was getting ready to start college, and I was very excited about going to college. So thank heaven that show didn't go, because I would have never gone to college, which wouldn't have been good.
Yeah.
And I would have been a horrible actress, because I would have been like those over-animated young people on television,
Yeah.
where everything's real big, and you make a lot of faces, like that.
Yeah. Now.
So I did that.
Now I see you did a Laverne and Shirley. Then it looks like a small film. 8 is Enough. I had mentioned, and it looks like you played a recurring character. Were you like Willie Ames's girlfriend or something?
I was Willie Ames's girlfriend.
You were.
Yeah, I was.
I figured you were around the same age, so it had to be either him or Grant
Willie
Goodies.
Ames's girlfriend. My character's name was Jill, and I was Willie Ames's girlfriend. And the big thing was that big episode was that he wanted me to have sex with him.
Yeah.
And I would not. And it was like a very big deal for 8 is Enough to tackle that issue.
Yeah.
And he gave me his class ring, and I had to give it back to him because I would not. I was like, that was a very fun show. I met Betty Buckley on that show. It was like an idol.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Absolute idol of mine. So I met Betty Buckley, and she was so nice. She was so great. She was fabulous.
Hmm.
And I did a number of episodes of that show, which was fun. I think I was still 17. I might have turned 18 by that time. I know I was 17 when I did Laverne and Shirley because I had to have a guardian.
Yeah.
And those are the first few jobs I did. Then I did some TV movies with Helen Hunt where we played, I don't know, dorky teenagers or something.
I see Bay City Blues. That was, I guess, your first show as a regular. That was like a minor league baseball team, if I recall.
Yeah,
Were you like
yeah.
the secretary, or what?
No, I was like a little sex pot. I was like, I was the wife of a baseball player,
Okay.
and I was like this little nymph kind of, woman who was always in skimpy clothes, and they were like these real blue collar kind of these two characters. I played it with Perry Lang, played the husband, and we were like these real blue collar, small town kind of couple who'd been like high school sweethearts. And the character, her name was Judy Knuckles, and she was really, yeah, I was always in like these skimpy tops that were 2 sizes too small, and I was supposed to have like had a fling with the cable TV man, and she was a little bit, you know, fast and wild, and it was a fun character. I mean, I really liked that character. It was the exact opposite character of what I played on LA Law.
Hmm. Yeah, and I'm just looking at the cast list of that show. Ken Olin from 30 Something was
Yep.
on it.
Yep.
Larry Flash Jenkins. I remember him from The White Shadow.
Yep.
Dennis Franz, who was
Yep.
on NYPD Blue, and it looks like even Sharon Stone was on it for a few
Yep.
episodes.
Sharon Stone. There were only 3 women in that show initially, and it was me, Sharon Stone, and Kelly Harmon.
Was she a semi-regular on that show, I guess?
Yeah, we were all regulars. We all played. Sharon and I played Baseball Wives. Patrick Cassidy was on it. He played Sharon's husband. He was like a star pitcher or something. And then Kelly Harmon, who was such a nice woman, played. She was like the wife of a rich, abusive, horrible guy or something, and she was having an affair with Michael Nouri, I think. Yeah. On the show.
Now, I also see that you had done an after-school special, one of those ABC after-school specials. I remember that was a little too after my time, but were you, I guess, the mother of like a crippled?
I was a teenage girl that was raped hitchhiking. That was it. Of course.
Okay.
Yeah. It was a cautionary tale not to hitchhike, and so.
Andrea's story, a hitchhiking tragedy.
Hitchhiking tragedy, yeah.
Where the whole plot is summed up in the title.
And Moosey Dryer, who's a nice guy, Moosey Dryer and I, he used to be my boyfriend, and I don't know, we're like hitchhiking.
Oh God, Moosey Dryer, yeah.
Moosey Dryer, he played my boyfriend, Moosey Dryer.
Wow.
And of course, Carrie Snodgrass played my mother, and she was wonderful. She was so good.
I've always wondered, what was Moosey Dryer's real name? Like Melvin?
I don't know, but we all called him Moosey. But yeah, Moosey Dryer played my boyfriend, and Carrie Snodgrass played my mom. And it was a very well-written little thing. I mean, it was a very well-written thing. And I enjoyed that. I enjoyed that job a lot. And it was a lot of fun. But it was, it was another one of those. They always, for some reason, they always cast me. I don't know why. Maybe I get this off. I didn't think I do. But they always want to cast me in these, like, sort of weepy, big to me sort of women, and I just hate the idea that people see me that way, because I really don't see myself that way at all.
And then I see you did a TV movie called Seduce, where you played a character called Thunder Thighs.
The joke was supposed to be that I was supposed to be like this. I remember my agent didn't want me to do it. It was a weird movie. It was like about I don't know. They were looking for I think it was Gregory Harrison. They were looking for criminals or tracking down some criminal, and I was supposed to play this like syphilitic, really skinny Appalachian call girl who had ended up in Chicago. And the joke was, and I think I weighed like 97 pounds, that the character was called Thunder Thighs, but I was like a stick,
Yeah.
And I just remember that I did some scene in a smoky bar, and I had on like a bunch of leather clothes, and I was supposed to play this like really tough hooker. But yeah, Thunder Thighs. Yeah, that was me.
Now I see that you're listed as Michelle with 2 L's in a thing called The Little Sister. Is that one of those things where you had to change your name for SAG, or was it just
I don't even know what that is.
Well, let me take a look here. The Little Sister. You played Kevin's friend, it says. Let's see. The Little Sister. A Boston probations officer becomes obsessed with a troubled 18-year-old girl. I would assume that's you. Efforts to reach her are stymied by events in her past, and is ultimately revealed to be an incestuous relationship with her father.
That's not me.
That's not.
I don't know what that
is. Okay. So, well, it says it starred John Savage, Tracy Pollan, Roxanne Hart, And then when I click on it, well, I don't see your name. Okay, so I had mentioned that we have to be wary about IMDb and Wikipedia.
Yeah, there are other people who have two L's in their name,
Yeah.
but no, that's not me, and I don't ever remember doing that.
The first woman I interviewed, Karen Austin, says there's an actress from Canada with the name Karen Austin. So it may be a Michele Greene with two L's that they just
Yeah,
stuck
there
to.
is a there. I know there's another actress named Michele Greene with two L's, but it's not me. Yeah,
Okay.
that's funny. I wish I'd worked with John Savage and all
Yeah.
those people.
Perry Mason, Matlock, you did. Now it looks here like you did. I guess this looks like a theatrical movie in '88 called "Going to the Chapel." Was that a theatrical film?
Yes, it was really crazy. It was one of those movies that NBC did where they pulled a bunch of people off all their shows and just put them into some crazy comedy.
Hmm.
And I played a bride. I think Cloris Leachman played my mother or my grandmother or something. She was great. She was so funny to work with. It was one of those crazy. Remember they used to do those things where they'd do like some TV movie during hiatus, and they would just pull all these actors off their shows and put them in some crazy show. That's what it was. It was silly. It was like a silly, lighthearted, the wedding's off,
I know it's interesting. Yesterday, when I did a show on television sitcoms, we were talking about Mary Tyler Moore shows, and Cloris Leachman played not Rhoda, Phyllis, the spin-off show, and it was so odd because most of us agreed that didn't really utilize her talents. Because when you see Cloris Leachman in other film stuff, she's greatly funny, and that was supposedly a comedy, but it's like they totally restrained her real talents. And it sounds like that one of the things that you and I guess a lot of actors feel is that sometimes they're never utilized to their full extent. Is that something that you've often felt?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, you get as women's roles tend to be quite one dimensional. Maybe two dimensional at best. So there's a lot of things you never get to access. You never because you have to. I remember I did a. Oh, to have two stories. This is how bad TV can be. When I was working on LA Law, they never wrote anything for me that was funny, right? Yeah. Very rarely wrote anything for me that was funny. So one day, in one scene, they had written this thing that was actually quite funny. And we were rehearsing it, and the director, who was also a producer, came up to me and said, Michele, you're so different in this scene. And I said, well, yeah, that's because the scene is funny. And she said, I'm just wondering what it is. Like, you seem so much freer in this scene than you do normally. And I said, well, the scene is funny. I'm always crying and in stress on this show, and the scene is funny. And she couldn't get that. And she said, well, I think it might be your makeup. And I said, what are you talking about? She said, you don't have your makeup on yet, because we were doing a run-through before we went into makeup. You don't have your makeup on yet. And I'm thinking that maybe when your makeup is on, that restrains you. And I said, what are you talking about? The scene is funny. I was like, it's not my makeup. The scene is funny. So I'm playing it funny. You never let me be funny. This is like the only time in 5 years you let me be funny. So now you think I seem free? It's funny. And, and that was like, and then I was doing an episode of I got this gig on a Lifetime show that was actually really funny. It was supposed to be this character it was written like black comedy. She's supposed to be this woman who was like Rachel Ray.
Yeah.
And she had this big empire of, a food show and frozen food. And she finds out that she has leprosy, which is actually more common than we think. And, and treatable and everything else. But she finds out she has leprosy. And all she can think about is how this is going to affect her food empire, because nobody is going to want to buy food from a person who has leprosy. And it was it was written in this way that was quite funny, and she was written to be really only concerned about her new frozen food line. But when we got into shooting it, and they cast me because I read it that way in the audition, and it was quite funny. When they cast me, they decided, oh, she doesn't seem likable. And I said, well, it's not a question of whether she's likable or not. This is written to be a certain style of black comedy, and you have to play it that way to make it funny. Otherwise, it's just sort of weird. No, make her more likable. Make it more sincere. Mm-hmm. And I was like, if you make this sincere, then the comedy is lost, right? It's
Yeah.
not funny anymore at all. It's only funny because she's only concerned about these things. In the face of this horrible disease, she's only concerned about her frozen food line. And the director just pushed me and pushed me and pushed me, and so I finally tried to sort of do what she wanted, and it never played right. It never played funny. It never played like anything. It just played like goulash or something, you know.
Yeah.
And that's when you just go, just let the character be. I know she's a woman. I know you want her to be likable. But guess what? This doesn't work if she's supposed to be concerned about being likable. This only works if she can be this nutty, self-involved sort of bitch, you know.
Yeah.
So,
Now,
things
yeah.
like that, you know.
Now, before we talk about the LA Law, it looks like your character from LA Law crossed over to Cop Rock, which was that.
I never did that. I don't know why they have me on there.
No?
I never did that.
Okay, so let's see here. It says Abby Perkins in Pots Don't Fail Me Now. Abby Perkins uncredited. So you were never in Cop Rock.
Never.
So that's
I was
okay.
never in Cop Rock.
Yeah, and I think wasn't that ABC? It would be odd for an NBC character to cross.
I was never in Cop Rock.
Okay.
I mean, I really wasn't, unless I was like just walking through a scene or something. I don't even remember doing it. I don't think I ever was.
Okay.
I don't remember at all. No.
Well, we talked a little bit about the character of Abby Perkins and the pros and cons of that character. How did you land that? Was it just fortuity? What did you have to go through 4 or 5 rounds of tryout? Or?
That's quite easy. I had done Bay City Blues, where I had played Judy Knuckles. Bay City Blues was not a success at all. It died after a few episodes. But I knew Stephen Bochco, and I knew that whole team of writers because they had all been on Bay City.
Yeah.
And when they were putting LA Law together, they wrote that role of Abby Perkins with me in mind.
Oh.
So I didn't go through a big audition process. They wrote that role thinking of me because I'd been on another show with them. And that was, you know, that's a nice, easy way to get a job, you know.
Yeah.
But,
was your character? I mean, initially, I guess it was conceived as an ensemble, but then I guess Harry Hamlin and one of the other fellows who slips my mind, became like the bigger name stars, and then Tucker and Eikenberry sort of dominant. As the series went on, did your character stay sort of prominent, or was she always a secondary character?
I was always a secondary character. I mean, I really was. You know, I think part of it was that the writers on that show couldn't really relate to my character. You know, the first season, they still had Terry Louise Fisher, who was a very good writer and one of the creators of LA Law. And she wrote wonderful roles for women. She had done Cagney and Lacey. She was a wonderful writer. But when she left, suddenly the entire writing crew were this particular group of guys. And they, you know, I've known them for a number of years. And they just, you know, they couldn't relate to, they didn't know what to write. They were all mostly middle-aged writers, and they didn't know what to write for a 24, 25-year-old single woman who's a single parent. It was like not in their frame of reference, you know?
Yeah.
So they just sort of plugged Abby in here and plugged Abby in there, and every now and then you'd get a good storyline and be like, oh, this is great. But a lot of the focus was on the characters that those writers could relate to. And in defense of that, you know, it's hard to write 22 episodes in a year. So, you know, write where your mind goes.
Now, I had mentioned on Wikipedia, it says that your character had the first lesbian kiss with the Amanda Donahoe character. Was this one of these things where they were going for like the wild things or the Mulholland Drive cheap titillation, or was this your character supposedly coming out of the closet? Or was it done for just cheap thrills like the raping of Stephanie Kramer described, or was it something that had an involving story?
It was done for cheap thrills.
Yeah.
Absolutely. They just wanted to do something different, and they thought, ooh, let's try that, and let's just plug Abby into that. Okay. There was never any plan or anything to say, hey, maybe this woman really is, you know, shifting her sexuality. Maybe she really is considering this. Never. And the network sent down a directive that said you cannot have 2 female characters who are regular actresses, regular characters on a series, have a lesbian relationship. Boom. Mm-hmm.
So it was just
but
one episode?
yeah, they weren't going to do it anyway. I mean, it was just going to be like, hey, let's try that.
Mm-hmm.
Woohoo! You know, it was not like something that I would consider was like well thought out or organic in any way. It was just kind of like, let's try. But it did get a lot of attention because it was the very first time we'd ever seen that. You know.
Yeah. What was the overall 5-year arc of your character? You mentioned that the character was a single mom. Then you had this stunt episode. Did the character actually evolve, or was she always sort of just the best friend to lend the ear to other characters?
I don't think she ever really evolved. I don't think she did. I mean, I felt that she just kind of. I don't think they ever gave that character a lot of. I don't think they ever gave Abby like storylines that really allowed her to sort of grow and become a different person. I went through this period where I guess I was supposed to be upset because they didn't make me a partner, and I went off and started my own law firm. And that year I had some good stories. That year I actually did have some good storylines. It was like season 4 or 3 or something. And then you had like these little bursts where you suddenly had some great storylines, and then they'd kind of like peter out, and, and then you would be back to being Abby sitting in a conference room saying, "We start depositions tomorrow."
Yeah. You left a few years early before the show ran its course. Was that you just looking to break out of the mold? Were you dissatisfied with the character, or some of your castmates? What prompted your exit?
Actually, what happened was, and it was really unpleasant. There had been a big shakeup in the production staff at LA Law, and Steve Bochco, who had sort of written that role for me, Stephen was really leaving. And he had stepped back, a bit the year or so before, and David Kelly had taken over. But they were. I'm not answering that. Let me decline that person. Thank you. But they were leaving, and there was a guy who was a producer who had started out as an AD, and I had known him for many years. I had known him since he was. I think he was an AD when I did Bay City Blues. He may have been a producer already. And that particular guy was, which he admitted years later, going through a terrible time in his life and was really antagonistic and sort of hated everybody. And that last year that I was on, he harassed me to no end. It was like non-stop.
What are we talking, personal or sexual harassment?
No, not sexual harassment, not like that. Just like the kind of person who would he'd come down to the set, and you'd be halfway through a scene, he'd shot half the scene, and he'd say, "I don't like that jacket she's wearing. Let's change it," which meant you had to reshoot everything you had just done, Or he'd call me into his office and say, "I've put together a reel of all your hairstyles over the last several years, and these are the ones I like, and these are the ones I don't like." And, there was like this weird, gratuitous sort of... And everybody in the cast knew. We all knew when you got a call to go to that guy's office, everybody was going to be raked over the coals. So we would say, "Oh, Harry, it's your turn this week. Let's see what you did." And but he especially didn't like me. And we finished the 5th season, and my character had been made a partner in the law firm. And then Stephen and the other guys left, and this particular fellow sort of rose in power. And he decided that he was not going to have me on anymore. And they called my agent and said, "We're not picking up her option."
So did they just kill her off?
Yeah, and they just like, "She's gone."
Oh.
And it was completely personal. I mean, it was absolutely personal thing because this guy just didn't like me. They had made my character a partner at the end of the season. And it was like, what now? Oh, now she's gone. And I was completely stunned. I mean, I had no idea it was coming. There was nothing. I had no clue. It was just, and it was absolutely like some weird personal vendetta. I didn't even know where it started. He was just an angry guy. And several years later, I ran into him and he apologized and he said, "I'm really, really sorry I did that." Yeah. He said, I did that. And I feel really bad that I did, and it was absolutely me, and there was nothing you did, and it was completely a personal thing that I made happen. Yeah. Which was really crappy. I mean, when you think about it, really. And I was like, "Well, thanks for that." Yeah. But it was, and it just, I got this call over the summer, and I was like, what do you mean? What are you talking about? They just made my character a partner on the series. I mean, what do you, in the law firm? And they were like, I know. My agent said, I don't know. I just got this call, and we're completely blindsided by this. So, and then, then they desperately wanted me to come back so they could, for several episodes, so they could find a way to write my character out of the story that made sense. But I was so upset. I said, hell no. I said, you decided you don't want me back? And the other producers were like, we don't want that. We didn't want that, but he has all the power now, and he got to make the decision. And the other writers were like, we don't want this. And I said, well, I don't know what to tell you. If he made this decision, then you let him find a way to make sense of it. I'm not coming back, for 2 episodes to make it easy for you to get rid of me. Yeah. And then I just went on and started doing TV movies and whatnot. But it was really a shock because I had no idea it was coming. And I knew that it was a weird personal thing that was based on like nothing. I mean, it was like nothing. And that's one of the difficulties of being an actor. It's like something like that can happen to you at any time, and you have no recourse. I mean, you can't say in another job you can say I have been fired or let go with no cause, for no reason. But if you're an actor on a TV show, they can just decide they don't like you, or they had an argument with you one day over lunch or something, and now they don't want you around anymore. So it was a big shock. It was really stunning to me. And I had worked with, the actors were all great, but I had worked with all those producers and writers for years. And so I was really, and I had known Stephen Bochco for almost 10 years at that point. And I was really, I really felt a huge sense of betrayal by people that I considered to be my friends, my friends and my colleagues.
Well, let's talk about some of the colleagues. You mentioned you were 10 or 15 years younger than most of the other actors in the cast. Was there any actor or actress that took you under their wings when you had a particularly difficult scene, maybe in the first few episodes or something? Were there any people? No?
No, I mean, everybody, it was a great cast of actors, really nice people. I mean, no big egos, nobody who was crazy, really nice group of people. Everybody happy to be there, everybody doing their best, giving 100%. It was great. I mean, the cast of actors were wonderful. And we never, in the 5 years I was on there, I don't remember anybody ever having like big dust-ups or disagreements or anything. Nicest group of people you can imagine. And everybody got along well, everybody was very supportive of each other. Everybody was pulling together to make the show as good as possible. I had certain people I was particularly fond of. I was very fond of Harry. He and I, became very good friends. Yeah. I was very fond of Blair because he and I were sort of the same age. Yeah. Harry and Susan were probably the closest in age to Blair and I. Maybe Jimmy Smits too, but a lot of the other characters were a lot older. So, and they were just in different times of their lives. They had like teenage kids. Yeah. We were like, huh? What? But they're a wonderful group of people, and really, really supportive of each other. And that was one of the great things that I took away from LA Law, was having had the experience of working with a really wonderful group of actors.
You mentioned Bochco and David Kelly, and Stephen Bochco and David Kelly are over the last 30 or 40 years, two of the some also with like someone like Stephen J. Cannell. These are the people who have created some of the more, I guess you call iconic, if you will, shows. Right. That and their shows generally, for good or ill, depending on your opinion, at least had a vision. I know some actors have told me that one of the things that's the most troubling, either on a set or on a continuing series, is when the boat is adrift at sea, and you may have a good part this episode, but then the next 12 episodes you're like, what the fuck am I doing? Was being in a show that had maybe a certain end goal to a certain extent by a Bochco, and I see later you did a Picket Fences, which was a Kelly show too. Is there a certain level of comfort going on to a show like that rather than something you don't know, or something that's just bric-a-brac?
1 second, I have to check my cord here. I thought I was plugged in. Now it's telling me I'm not. Oh, good. I am again. Right. It's much easier, of course, much easier. When you have strong leadership, for better or for worse, whether you like them or not, when you have strong leadership at the head of the show, everything runs more smoothly. Everybody knows what they're working for. Everybody knows what they're working towards. You don't have people acting out and jockeying for position, because okay, this guy's the boss. This is what we're doing. This is the vision that we're all working towards. It's so much easier. When you're adrift, my God, it's horrible. It's horrible. You have no sense of safety. You have no sense of continuity, of things making sense. You're just sort of out there. And I think that when you have situations like that is when you do get a lot of acting out from people in the cast and in the production.
Yeah. Now, afterwards, you have some TV movies, and I just want to read the titles and let me guess what the character played. Okay, so we have a movie in '91 called Posing, inspired by 3 real stories. Playboy Playmate.
Playboy Playmate, yeah. It was about 3 regular women who decided to pose for Playboy.
Okay.
And, I played like some mousy, sexually repressed secretary or lawyer or something, and I decided to pose for Playboy, and that's going to like open up my life and make my relationships better or something. Okay. It was silly.
Now, Silent Victim, you were sexually abused.
Silent Victim. Oh, Silent Victim! God, that was such a good movie initially. Kyle Secor is in that, right?
Let's see here. I'm just looking at the list here. Let me open that page. Starring Michele Greene, Eli Pouget, Kyle Secor.
Yes, Eli Pouget and Kyle Secor, and it was actually a wonderful movie. It was a great, wonderful script. It was called Hot House, and it was a very interesting script about a woman.
Okay, abusive husband. Okay.
Who has an abusive husband, and she wants to leave him, and as she's planning to leave him, she finds out she's pregnant, and she doesn't want to go ahead and have a baby because she doesn't want to be tied to this abusive guy, and she wants out of this life. And then she sort of really gets caught in this thing between these different, forces pulling her anti-abortion, pro-choice, and they were wonderful actors. And Kyle Secor is a wonderful actor, and he played my husband. And then they gave it that like really bad B movie title, which. Like I said, you don't know how it's going to be in the end.
Yeah.
Hot House was a great title, and it was a wonderful script. It was a wonderful role. Yeah. And it just became Silent Victim, which sounds like every bad B movie you've ever seen.
Right, and so then we have Moment of Truth, A Child Too Many. You were a baby seller.
I was. I did a whole series of these movies for O'Hara Horowitz, who had a contract with Lifetime. There were all these women in Jeopardy movies, and that was one where I was
a surrogate mother. Okay.
Yes, I was a surrogate who already had like 1 million kids of her own, and I'm supposed to be helping this well-to-do couple have a baby, and it ends up being twins, and they only want one. The big problem is, well, how can you only want one? And and then and she ends up taking both of them at the end because she doesn't want to separate them, and she then has 9 kids, or so, But it was sort of touching on that whole thing of surrogacy, which was very new at the time.
Yeah.
So they sort of thought, ooh, there's a story in that. That was a fun movie.
Now I mentioned
Directed by a great guy.
Yeah, I mentioned David Kelly. You did a Picket Fences episode. Okay. That was sort of his first, I think, major hit. I think quirky series.
Yeah. I don't even remember what I did on it. I have no idea.
Okay. Then. Let's see. Now we have another listing with a double L, Michele Greene here, and let me see if this rings a bell. It's something called Stranger by Night, 1994. That wasn't you.
That is me, Stranger.
Oh, it is. Oh, Stephen Bauer, Jennifer Rubin, Billy Cat. Yep. Okay, so that is actually you. So someone's.
That is me. Yeah.
What was then? That looks like it's a straight to video release. It
was a crazy movie. It was kind of a good role. I played this interesting character. She was like it was this odd woman. Stephen Bauer was the main character, and he was this sort of crooked cop, or I don't even remember anymore. He was a crooked cop. He was doing something, and I was this woman who lived next door to him. It was sort of like a call girl, like a high-end call girl or something. And interesting character. I liked the role. But the movie was very crazy. I'd done a few different movies with Billy Cat, who's really nice, really nice guy, and we were in that. And I remember everybody got food poisoning on that. Yeah. That's what I always remember about that movie.
Well, it looks like you did TV movie with your buddy Harry Hamlin called Badge of Betrayal.
I did. Where, guess what?
Were you
I
his
was
wife
like
this time?
he was like the sheriff, and I was like a new policewoman in a
Ah.
new town, and he was a scary, abusive guy who was, you know, trying to have an affair with me, and then when I wouldn't, he was trying to kill me. And I got to shoot Harry. I remember. You know, there were all these TV movies I did in Canada. You know, you'd go to Vancouver, you'd stay in a nice hotel, you know, you'd run around. In that case, you run around with a gun and a thing. And, you know, you try to find the moments that are really good. You try to find the moments that are really human and make the most of them. But in those kind of movies, you do spend a fair amount of time, you know, servicing the plot, which is fine.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned that you like doing some more out there roles, and I see a couple of sci-fi credits here. The Outer Limits you did, the revival, and then you did a Stargate SG-1 episode as well.
Oh, yes, I did. Yeah.
Were those more enjoyable because they were fantasy sci-fi? Or?
Yeah, I suppose. In Outer Limits, I played like a villain, which I liked. Yeah. I had my hair cut the same way I do now. Yeah. I just remember I had really short hair, and I was a villain. And something. Wheeler Vachon was the lead character who was being, you know, gaslighted by someone. Yeah. And then when I did Stargate, I played Richard Dean Anderson's love interest. He got like stuck on another planet, and he couldn't find the Stargate, and he couldn't get back, and he thought he was never going to get back. So it was a planet that everything looked like a swamp. We shot it in some townships outside of Vancouver.
Yeah, it's amazing in sci-fi worlds. I mean, on Earth here we have like 1,500 different types of possible landscapes, but all science fiction planets are just a swamp, or they're just a glacier.
That's what it was. It was like a swamp. And I played his love. So he's supposed to think he's stuck in this world, and so he and I have this romance, and which was very fun. I have to say, Richard Dean Anderson was, you know, I'd only known him from like MacGyver, and I kind of showed up on the set, and I sort of had this idea that he was going to be like some big vain asshole or something. And he was such a nice man. He was a new father, and he was like the nicest man. And I will say this. There was one scene where he was supposed to kiss me, and he said to me, he said, okay, I want you to know I'm going to really kiss you. And I said, well, what does that mean exactly? He said, like, I'm going to do the whole thing. I'm not going to, like, fake kiss you. I said, oh, well, thanks for, you know, letting me know. So I'm, you know, prepared. And then I will say, Richard Dean Anderson gave me a kiss, and I swear that knocked my socks off. I went like weak in the knees. I went, woo! And I said, well, no wonder you've been like this big TV idol for all these women all these years.
Well, you have to remember, I watched soap operas. He started out on General Hospital, so he was doing in the Love in the Afternoon in the 80s before MacGyver.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I'll tell you. At that point, he and I were friends. I was like, yeah, sure, Richard, go ahead. But boy, I was like, wow. Woohoo!
Now, it looks like you did a movie called Los Treasure dos Santos. Did you actually get to speak some Spanish in that?
No, I didn't. I did that with a wonderful director named Jorge Montesi, who was the same guy who did that movie about the surrogate.
Oh, okay.
He had done a bunch of, taking this crazy headband off, he had done a bunch of these TV movies and films in Canada. He's a wonderful director, great guy, very smart, and really a wonderful artist. You know, he's like a cinematographer and a writer and a producer, and he came from Chile, and he had been in political prison in Chile. He'd been a filmmaker there who had gotten in trouble, you know, during the Pinochet years for making movies that I guess were, I don't know, too progressive or whatever, asked too many questions. So he'd been in political prison, and then when he was released, he had to choose a country to go to, and he went to Canada. But boy, I've always loved working with him. He's a wonderful, wonderful director, and so smart. And I did several movies with him. He's one of those people you go, now that's a pleasure. That's just a pleasure to show up to work every day.
So in 2000, I see a listing that doesn't have any idea what it's about. It's called Alcatraz Avenue. Is that you as well?
No, I don't know who that is.
Okay. It says Alcatraz Avenue. You played a character named Lisa, but let's see here. Directed Tom Edgar. Doesn't ring a bell?
I have no idea who that
is. Okay, so that's what the fourth.
Maybe I did that, but I have no recollection of what it is.
So that's at least 4 errors that we've gotten so far.
Yeah, I don't know Alcatraz Avenue. No.
Okay. Well, now it looks like you played a couple of roles on the old Dick Van Dyke Diagnosis Murder episode. What was it like working with someone like him who was such a big star?
Great,
Yeah,
so great.
yeah,
I mean, Dick Van Dyke to me he's like one of my idols, right? I
yeah,
mean, Mary Poppins and the Dick Van Dyke Show, and
yeah.
they're so great. It's I just God, the chimney sweep dance, everything, and I was so thrilled to meet Dick Van Dyke. I have a picture in my office, it's in my box of stuff I have to put up. Actually, no, it's in a friend's house down in LA because I'm worried about fires up here because we get a lot of fires up here.
Yeah.
So all my really great career memorabilia I keep down in LA. But Dick Van Dyke was fabulous. He's such a nice man. He's so gracious. He's such a pro, so kind, so considerate to everybody on the crew. If you have a guy like that who's the main guy, he's the producer, he's the star, the show's built around him. If you have a guy like that who's an asshole, everybody's life is hard, every single day. But he was so lovely, and I was just beside myself when he walked on the set the first time. I was just like, "Hi, Mr. Van Dyke, can I take a picture with you?"
Okay. Now something tells me that I found a fifth error here. Did you do a movie called in '01, A Family Affair, playing a character named Reggie?
I did.
Oh, you did? Okay, so I'm wrong. Okay.
I did. It was an indie movie. It was very funny script. It was
Helen Lesnick was the director?
Yeah. It was like a sort of gay love story, a lesbian love story.
So you played a lesbian?
Yes.
Okay.
And Helen was the star of it, and she had written it. She was a funny writer, and she and her girlfriend had produced this movie. And it had sort of a slightly Woody Allen-esque sort of thing, sort of cerebral humor. And she plays this woman who has come off of a relationship that was really tortured with her ex, who was like this raging narcissist. That was me. And she's trying to rebuild her life, and she's living with her parents in San Diego, and she's like this very sort of cerebral New Yorker, and she meets this blonde, who's really nice, this sort of blonde beach girl who's really nice, and they kind of like start having a relationship, but it's very Woody Allen-esque. She's always questioning whether this sort of California thing is really right for her. And then, of course, the narcissistic ex-girlfriend who doesn't want her to be happy with anyone else, but doesn't want her either, comes back. And it was a very, very funny role. I actually loved that role. It was very, very funny, and I had a great time. On that.
I'm looking here now. I know when I spoke with Stephanie Kramer, she said that how they had tried to revive Hunter about 15 years or 10 years after it went off the air. It looks like you did an LA Law movie. Did they reach out to you and say, "Well, we're sorry"? That fellow who said that he screwed you, was this after?
No, he didn't say he was sorry. He didn't say he was sorry until way after that.
Yeah. So how did they woo you back? Did they just offer you a lot of money?
Yeah, no, it was around that time. They offered everybody some money, so money. They wanted everybody to come back and do it, and some of us came back. A few people didn't. I think Jimmy didn't come back. He didn't want to, and he was busy working. And I can completely see why someone wouldn't want to revisit that. And then I don't think the movie came out very well. It was sort of awful. But it was fun to get together with everybody in Canada. We shot in Canada, and we just, we all went out to a Chinese restaurant the first night, and we were like, "Hey, what are you doing, man?" And it was fun. It was fun. It was just one of those jobs you do, and it was nice to work with Richard Dysart again because I was always really fond of him. But yeah, it was just something that I don't think it did very well. It wasn't a very good movie. It just didn't make any sense. It was kind of like,
It looks like you guessed it on Judging Amy and Crossing Jordan. Both of those had female lead stars. Was there anything different when you go on a show where the central character, the main support, is a woman? Is there anything that there's more expectations on them? You know what I'm saying is when you have a Dick Van Dyke or someone a male who's the putative star. Do they get a different kind of treatment? Is there a different kind of mindset when everyone's job?
I didn't see that. I mean, the women who carried those shows, they were by far, they were the stars of those shows. They were in practically every scene. They were working huge number of hours every day. They were all very nice. I got along great with all of them. But no, I just, I think, when you're number one on the call sheet, you're number one on the call sheet, and everybody knows that you're in pretty much everything, and, you're showing up and you're doing your work. Otherwise, your show's not going to succeed.
Now, you did a nip tuck, and I know cable is more risque, and I know I've seen clips people have sent me like nip tucks. They have, they do the sort of gratuitous lesbianism, and the people have these sexual problems and whatnot. Were you like, tied up and being taken from behind by one of the surgeons?
No, I was another grieving mother. I spent the whole episode crying.
Uh-huh.
I worked with who's that actress? I loved her. I love her.
The blonde one?
With Dee Dee. Do you see her name on it?
Let me see here. I think I know who you're talking about. Let me see here.
She was on The Wire.
Let's see. Jolie Richardson? Jolie Richardson?
No, it was Dee Dee Lovejoy.
Wait a minute. What is this here? Like a nip tuck. Okay. Dee Dee Lovejoy. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's see. Full cast here. We got Kelly Carlson. Let's see. But the character's name was Dee Dee?
No, the actress's name is Dee Dee Lovejoy. I'm pretty sure.
I'm looking here. Off the top of my head, I don't see it. Let's see. Mike McNamara, Kimber Henry, Dr. Quentin Costa, Dee Dee Lovejoy. I don't see it here.
Oh, I'm pretty sure that's who it is. Maybe I'm totally wrong. I might be having like a brain lapse or something.
What was the name of the actress? Do you know?
The name of the actress is Dee Dee Lovejoy.
Oh, the name. Okay, maybe I'm the actress here. I'm looking on the wrong side here. I don't see it. Huh? Well, Alanis Morissette was on that. That's odd. Dee Dee Lovejoy. Well, I don't. I'm just taking a quick look here because my thing is loaded. But anyway.
You never know those credits. So she's a wonderful actress. We played these two women who were had teenage daughters, and her daughter had been in a disfiguring accident and had her face ripped off, and I played a woman whose daughter had died, was brain dead, and was in perfect condition, and they were going to try a face transplant because they were, that was a very cutting edge thing. They were going to, which is still a cutting edge thing, but they were going to explore this idea that you could do that, and we were supposed to be these two women who had sort of met in this horrible situation, and it was a good show. I mean, I loved doing it. It was fun, but it was another one of the weepy moms.
Yeah.
Spent my whole time next to a hospital bed weeping.
Now the bulk, and you did some other guests and a couple of other small roles, but I want to talk a little bit since I'd mentioned about you had written some children's books and you're singing here, and as that relates to acting. But before I get onto that, let me just ask regarding television. Is there a part of you that wishes that you had been able to break into more than just say some of these smaller indie films? Because I know some actors have spoken about the walls between film and television, and television there's prime time and soap operas, and then there's stage, and then there's dinner theater and Broadway and LA and whatnot. There are all of these sort of artificial boundaries. Do you wish that that acting could be more fluid, that people could?
I do. I think it's more fluid now. I think that, like, when I was on LA Law and I was on this big series, I think those boundaries were much more rigid. Yeah. I mean, there really was a thing of, like, if you did movies, you didn't do TV.
Yeah.
That's just, you didn't. If you did TV, you weren't going to get in a movie.
Yeah.
Forget it. Maybe you could get in some indie movies, little ones, but, there was this, it was really like you were a film actress or you were a TV actress. Now, I think it's a much more fluid world, and it used to be impossible so difficult if you were known, especially as an actor on TV or even an actor in films, if you were also a singer. I mean, that was like a joke, you were going to be like Don Johnson or something, you know what I mean? You was going to be like
the really David Hasselhoff effect.
Yeah, you were going to be David Hasselhoff. So you really couldn't be taken seriously in that way. And those boundaries have sort of disappeared over time, and they've disappeared with the internet. They've disappeared with the mass marketing that we have because of the internet, and that now, God, they want you to do everything. They want you to do every possible thing.
Yeah.
So they can put you out in a million markets with a million products. But it was not that way back then, and so that was different. That was hard because I'd always been a singer. I'd always been a singer my whole life, and then when I started doing a lot of music and writing a lot of music. And I had my band. My band was a Latin band. Most of our stuff we did was in Spanish. It was so far off the grid from the way people perceived me as an actress on TV that it was, I did it mostly for my own pleasure because I enjoyed it,
Would you have preferred to have, if you could look back, would you prefer to get acknowledged in music, say, win a Grammy rather than an Emmy?
No. I enjoy music. I enjoy singing. I like writing music. I enjoy it very much. But it comes in third, really.
Yeah.
So I'll be honest with you, writing comes in first, acting comes in second, and music comes in third.
Well, we'll talk about writing in a second. But performing, has the ability to sing enhanced your acting, do you think? Or is it just something that's just sort of coeval, that it's just one or the other, you know what I'm saying?
No, I think it does. There's a fluidity to music that you can lose in acting. Music doesn't stop. You can't like get bogged down in some emotional moment. You got to keep going. The next measure is coming. Keep going.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a fluidity to it. And performing music live, like with a live band, is so much harder than acting. You know what I mean? It's so you have so many other things that you.
Is it harder than stage acting?
Yes, it is. To me, it is.
Yeah.
Because it's not just you and another actor. You've got, you may have you and another singer, and you've got an entire band. And if any person in the band goes off, or you go off, or you come in at the wrong time, you've got all these people that have to adjust right there in front of you, and it has to sound seamless.
Well, let me just ask about the audience, because the last fellow I spoke to told me that he was shocked when he did some plays in Russia with a troupe, or in Poland rather, because he said that the Polish audience, that he could feel there's a silence when he was doing stage theater versus America in Poland. When he was in Poland, there's an intensity that the audience brought to look at the actors. They were totally involved in what if he blew his nose on stage or something, or was sniffling or something, they would detect it. Do you find a difference between the musical audience and a stage audience? Is there more intensity in one than the other? And is there a feedback cycle?
No, I think you get an instinctive sense of when they're with you and when they're not. Whether you're singing or you're doing a play or whatnot, you can tell when you have them and when you don't have them. And it's an immediate thing, it's an energy thing, and you pick it up. And maybe you go, I'm losing them right now. I gotta ramp this up, or I gotta do something, or So no, I don't find that. I don't find the audience situation, the reaction with the audience, that different.
So coming back full circle to talking about your mother bringing you up on or reading segments from plays or whatnot, and quoting them, you wrote a couple of kids' books, and I think maybe I'm mistaken, but have you said that you tried writing screenplays as well? What brought you?
I've written a number of screenplays because I like that format, and I'm accustomed to it. I've had a bunch of different movies optioned for this, and they get tied up in development, and then it doesn't happen because this factor changed or whatnot. Both of my books they're actually young adult novels.
Okay.
And they're both of them have been optioned to be developed in TV and as a film. Several times, actually. I keep, people go, I want to turn that into something.
Now, when you say young adult, are we talking like Goosebumps?
A little older than that.
Yeah.
That Goosebumps is sort of like my son reads Goosebumps, and he's in 4th grade.
Okay.
He actually reads Goosebumps he read Goosebumps the whole book in a day yesterday, so I think it might be a little easy for him.
Yeah.
But no, these are for kids that are like maybe 13. At the bottom end age, you're looking at 13. At the top end, you're looking at 17, really.
Mm-hmm.
So the first book I wrote was kind of a teen sleuth mystery novel set in LA with a Latina protagonist who's 15. And the second book is for an older audience because it was about It's called Keep Sweet, and it was about a young girl trying to escape a forced polygamous marriage in a fundamentalist Mormon cult, like out in the middle of nowhere. So, and that's a much more sort of harder hitting book. You know, it deals with more serious, hard hitting issues. You know, than the first one. I'm not really into like the sort of teen angst YA books. You know, like Does the Boy Like Me or Mean Girls at School. I'm just kind of not into that. I want to write books for a young adult audience. I like to write books that are a little sort of more about something. You know.
Yeah.
So. And I like both of those books, and I so enjoy writing. Temperamentally, I'm so much more that than I am an actress. I'm so happy to sit in a quiet room by myself all day with a cup of coffee, and
So would the hope be that if one of them got optioned and maybe, I don't know, became picked up by one of the, I don't know, Nickelodeon or one of these cables, that would free you, say, economically, that you could maybe
Yes.
produce your own
Yes.
screenplays?
Yes, that's my goal. My goal would be to have, because both of my current books, and I have another book I'm going out with in about 10 days to my book agent. If you can get any of your books, if you can sort of get your books out there and they sell well, and you get one of them into development, they turn into a movie or a TV series, then you've sort of cleared a hurdle that frees you up economically to be able to then say, I'm going to do this small movie. Or I wrote this play and I'm gonna put it on in the small theater, and you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And it frees you up to do those things, which is great because that's the goal of any artist. You know, it's like in the old days when you had a patron. You know, now you can, if you can have enough money to just do your projects your way, that's the greatest life in the world.
So would you, going forward, are you sort of looking to put acting behind you and be a director and be behind the scenes more than in front of the camera overall?
No, I honestly, I feel like I like all three things that I do so much. You know, I love writing so much, I love directing, and I love being an actress. I just feel sort of like I'm just going to keep doing all three of them and see where, you don't know where your road as an artist, you don't know where it's going to take you. And sometimes you think you really don't want X. And then X comes along and you go, okay, well, I'll take it. And X leads you to some incredible thing that you never would have foreseen happening. So you have to always be really open, to those possibilities. And to say, life is working for you. I heard that on some documentary recently. Life always works for you, not against you.
Well, I don't know about that, but let's end this segment. In the final segment, I'll give you a few minutes to wrap up your thoughts on things, and we'll do that in a moment.
Okay.
I have been speaking with actress Michele Greene. We've been talking about her career, about the art of acting, also singing, writing, and other artistic ventures. One final question, and then anything you want to say maybe to any other younger actors or anyone watching. Is there still like one dream role that you could get, either something, like you mentioned Hedda Gabler, and any advice? So those two things.
Oh, I want to play Queen Margaret.
Wow.
I want to play Queen Margaret in those, in the Henrys, in the, I forget now if it's Henry VI or which one. Queen Margaret, who is Margaret of Anjou, and she has this fabulous, fabulous monologue. She has a couple that are so great where where they're battling with the Yorks over the crown, and she wants her son to be crowned. I maybe have to be a little bit older, but boy, that role, I wanted to play that role since I was in college.
Yeah.
So great. Yeah.
And what are your any thoughts, especially for maybe some younger actors getting in the business, either about success in terms of career-wise or as far as the actual art?
I would say for younger actors, really learn how to do what you want to do. When you're very young, you can rely on a lot of things. You can rely on being cute. You can rely on being energetic. You can rely on all sorts of stuff. But I would say get some training and learn how to really do your craft, because that will carry you through and over those bumps in your career when you're making a transition from being a marketable type, and then maybe you want to become a different marketable type. But you have to know what you're doing, and it's not enough to just rely on the sort of easy things that come quickly.
Mm-hmm.
I would also say if you do other things, if you write, if you like to write, if you have a friend you like to write with, whatever, write. Create your own product, create your own roles, create your own opportunities. For young actors especially, create how you want to be perceived. Create the role you want. And then you become a double or triple threat, which is so much more appealing, and gives you a great deal of longevity and control in your career. And then I guess aside from that, I would just say, find other things. Find other things that you really love that are not part of the entertainment industry. And do those things. And make sure you do those things regularly. Because the industry can be so all-consuming and get your perspective on yourself so skewed, about what is happiness and what is success and what is beauty and what is, all these things. And make sure you have some things in your life that the entertainment industry is not part of.
Yeah.
At all.
Well, anyone who's interested in Michele Greene, I'll link to her website, even though it's a bit out of date, and I'll also link to her IMDb and Wikipedia pages. But I want to thank you for spending, it's going to be almost 3 hours talking about the arts and whatnot. So, again, thank you for your time.
Thank you. Great time.